mic's muted. There we go. Oh, and the Discord's muted. Hello! Hi, everyone! Wait, why do I have closed captioning there, too? Oh my goodness. I have it everywhere. There. Yay! Can you hear everyone?
Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello.
All right.
Welcome on in, everyone. How's it going? Yay! Yes, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Can we hear everyone? Yes, yes, yes. Thank you all
Yep.
for being
Testing.
here. If you haven't already, if you could retweet that we are live, that would be great. Much appreciated. Thank you everyone who has followed so far. Much appreciated. Like I mentioned before, or I've told many people, I stream usually on my personal account, and I don't really stream. I haven't streamed too much on the Dreamspeakers one, but I'm hoping to do more interviews and talking to people because, as of course, Dreamspeakers, we love promoting and celebrating Indigenous storytelling in multifaceted ways. And yeah, because we are storytellers and we do a lot of storytelling. So, hi, if you don't know me, my name is Aretha Greatrix. I am program director for Dream Speakers Festival Society. I am also a filmmaker myself, and I also am a streamer. So, I play games and stream online on Twitch at Simply Aretha. And so, yeah, uh, I did see about this game because I always like to I like to educate people about Indigenous issues and about Indigenous games, and one of them is representation in game development. So I'm always looking for Indigenous games, and so this was one that I kind of had been looking at and keeping an eye on, like when it was going to be released. And I think I can't remember if we reached out to you or if you reached out to our stream team, the Four Directions, but I know we got a thing saying that, hey, do you want to do this thing or something? Or maybe we did. I don't know. All I know is through that, I learned about the game and I got to play a little bit of it already. So I'm going to continue playing it a little bit and also interviewing these two lovely people from, oh goodness. I want to keep saying Achimowastanan, but I feel
That
like
might
I'm
be right
missing.
for you.
I think I'm. I think I'm missing something in the middle. Yeah,
Achimostawinan.
Chimowastanan. Okay. So yeah, so I'll start by welcoming my guests and have them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about your. Oh, a little bit about me. Again, I'm from Dream Speakers, but I am Swampy Cree or Moose Cree or Innu or Ilu from Quechua First Nation, which is in Northern Ontario, so Treaty 9 area. But I live in Amiskwichi Waskahegan, which is also known as Edmonton in Alberta and Treaty 6 territory. So that's a little bit of me. But we'll start with Meagan. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself and where you're from.
Sure. Tande Meagan Nisikasun, Apihtawikosisân, Hamilton, Ontario Nuchin. Hi, my name is Meagan, and I am Apihtawikosisân, or federally recognized as Métis of the Métis Nation of Ontario. And I live on part of Treaty, I think it's called Treaty 13 in Ontario, or what is Ontario now, but it's also called the Between the Lakes Treaty. And we're in a weird little spot, which is known as Hamilton, Ontario, between Six Nations and Takaranto. And I am the lead and founder of Achimostawinan Games, which is our mostly Indigenous staffed and owned video game studio. Are
Yeah, thank you.
Uh, Sadekaronhes yung my name's Sadekaronhes. I am a Gahaga Mohawk in English. My family is from the Canandaigua Reserve. I was born in Gayange, in upstate New York, for those who know the area. My dad's side of the family are Mexican Indigenous from the Casa Grandes region of Chihuahua. Um, I'm originally Canadian and US, but technically I'm Gahaga only, as that's the only federal paperwork I have is from my own nation. So that's fun. And yeah, I am the lead concept artist and the art lead for Achimostawinan Games, and kind of sort of work with Meagan and make it do what it do.
Thank you both for being here today. Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about the game before we. Uh, I know we talked a lot about the game previously when we first met and had our conversation about it. So before we start the game, maybe you both can tell us a little bit about the game and um, yeah, where did the idea come from and how did you get started in, I guess, game development?
Oh, asking all the big questions up front.
How much time do we have?
Well, yeah, we only like got an hour, right? Oh
Well,
man.
we technically have as long as you want to be. I was worried about your time commitment. Listen, I can stream for 6 hours, so
we could probably talk for that amount. I think Sade and I have got like like if we get asked to come out to things, we're like 3 hour minimum.
Yeah.
I don't care what you think, it's gonna be 3 hours no matter what. But yeah, so Hill Agency is, I guess the tagline is, it's an Indigenous cybernoir mystery game where you basically play as Meagan Hill, who only goes by Hill, and you get to kind of explore this sort of Indigenous futurist society city at its sort of like the almost the end of colonization, kind of like right on the cusp of total freedom, and some dame walks into your life and turns everything upside down, as is, a good noir.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
well, how did the idea come up with creating the game?
So like uh, every time I tell this, just people are like, "Oh, we could have had a better game." So way back in like 2017, I and a different artist were part of a group called Dreamspeakers Games in Toronto, and every February they would put on a game jam called Feb Fatale, and it usually would have some kind of like noir or cinema type theme to it. And that year it happened to be like the femme fatale. They were just like, we've been doing it for 3 years, let's go classic. And it originally had started out as, it was called PURITYdecay, and it was supposed to be a murder mystery dating sim where you could date anybody including the murderer, while also trying to solve the mystery. That was like a huge scope. We realized quite quickly, we're like, we don't really know how to make a dating sim feel good. So let's not do that because we only have 2 days. So we're like, let's just like make it an actual mystery game. So that's kind of where it got started, and then we ended up submitting it to imagineNATIVE, which is an Indigenous media festival in Toronto, in Canada, and it just got a lot of people being like, so when's the full game coming out? And that was kind of what led to what we have now. And then Sadi, I don't know, do you want to talk about kind of like, because you were there at the beginning of this game?
Yeah. So, like I said, this eventually the previous artist had left, and Meagan came to me through a mutual contact, Bethel Pense, um, and said, "Hey, I'm working on this project. Would you be interested in doing some character designs for me?" And I was just like, "Yeah, totally, no problem." She's like, "So what's the project?" She's like, "Well, it's like a noir, but like mixed with like a cyberpunk kind of Blade Runner feeling." And I'm just like, "I'm in, sold." I'm in. Just and so I just started out doing a couple character sheets for her based on the designs they already had, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up, coming on more, uh, more hours, more time, and then uh, Megan was just like, "Hey, you want to be a lead?" And I was just like, "Oh, yeah, sure, why not?" because
Because
this
I don't
keeps
want to do it.
this keeps happening in my life. I keep falling into leadership roles, and I'm just sort of like never really looking for them.
Got it. Take down your name. Will be lead a project.
Yeah. I didn't say I'd be good at it, but I will do it.
You are amazing.
I think I also read in your
Yeah.
bio as well too that you were working on the Coyote and Crow, the D&D
Yeah.
as
So
well.
I do have a longer career before working with Meagan. Um, so Coyote and Crow is also a project that I started around the same time,
Mm-hmm.
sort of bouncing back and forth between the two. And I ended up joining the project late. I was like, I heard about this thing on Kickstarter, and I was just like, oh man, that sounds awesome. It's
Mm-hmm.
an indigenous sci-fi fantasy, indigenous world that's never been colonized. I'm just like, man, that sounds awesome. I'd love to work on that. And then just sort of like by happenstance, someone sent Connor my name, and Connor Alexander is like the creator of Coyote and Crow, and he's just like, "Hey man, I saw your stuff. Would you be interested in doing some work?" And I was just like, "Sure, why not?" And so I have a couple pieces in the core role book, and there's one called there's two of them. One is for the I want to say it's like this. I always pronounce this wrong. The Suryata, which is like the ruling council of 12.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like kind of their meeting room. And the other one's just for a thing called ceremony. And then kind of just like, hey, would you be interested in doing the game screen? So the actual big game screen that you have in front of you is my piece of art. So it's like the biggest, most visible piece aside from like the cover of the game. So it's just like, wow. I was like, dang, dude, like you trust me enough to do this. All right, cool. And then then like my previous game industry, I actually worked on the Saw video games back in the mid
Oh,
2000s.
okay.
Um, yeah, I worked on Saw 1 and 2 as a concept artist, and then we also did a near future shooter called Blacklight Tango Down, and then I did worked on pre-production for the sequel, which is one of the first free to plays on PlayStation 4, which is Blacklight Retribution, and I left that project before it was over, but yeah, so like I have some game industry experience before meeting with Meagan, and it's kind of like, yeah, sure, man. I miss games, so I'm back. Let me do it.
I think I
Yeah,
asked.
way more experience than me.
I think I'd asked this before, but uh, do either one of you play games? And if so, what is your favorite game to play?
Huge game
Mm,
player.
Megan,
Oh
yeah.
man, favorite?
Megan.
I
Like, let's
I
say,
feel
let's say
like
you've had a hard day at work. Okay, you're very stressful. Things are
oh,
breaking, like they do, and you're like, I'm gonna relax and turn on my favorite game. What's that?
probably Okami. Yeah, probably Okami. That was actually the first game I ever played that made me go, "Oh wow, I think this might just be more than play." I think that's probably to this day is still I cited it as one of my like most favorite. If I could go back and just play that for like an entire week again, totally would do that. But right now, what I'm playing to relax is Planescape Torment, and it is
Yeah.
really good. And
Yeah.
I'm really sad because that was the kind of game I was looking for when I was like a teenager, and I could not find. Like everyone kept giving me different things, and that had come out when I was a teenager. I could have been playing it sooner.
Mhm. Yeah. So I actually got my start. So, like a lot of kids in the 80s, around Ataris was like one of the first things we ever like. My neighbors had an Atari, so like I always wanted to play Pitfall, and just never had one until we ended up getting a Nintendo. So like and this was at by the time the Super Nintendo was out, we got an original Nintendo. So like
Hmm.
playing Mario 3 and all those. So, like I really love the old platformers. So a lot of what I play now is more platformers, like open world games. As a matter of fact, before we jumped on here, I was beating some of the challenges in Horizon Zero Dawn that I had never gone back and done.
Hmm.
So I'm like, oh, I should go pick up some other games and like keep playing them and whatnot. So like a lot of open world games. Like I was really into Assassin's Creed until the last one that just came out, and that one finally kind of like ruined me as far as like, yeah, I'm not really feeling that anymore. But like I used to really enjoy open world like exploring games, and like I'm just kind of as I get older, I realize I don't have the time for it. So
Mhm.
like I like to play things that are shorter now, a little more tight. Like I used, I miss the old point and click adventures. Like as a kid, we had like the LucasArts bundle, so like Day of the Tentacle, and like the old Indiana Jones Fate of Atlantis game, and there was like one called The Dig that I'd never beat. Um, you know, these old, Sam and Max. Like I miss those games. So yeah, like this project was a really a chance to get back to some of that stuff I really love.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's it for games too. Like it's a especially when you can get lost in a storyline. I think that's the most important thing for me anyways, especially when I'm playing games. And I that's what I was saying, like um so far, like because we got a key to the game when it first came out. I played the first part, which is losing the toy, and so I'm like, okay, do I want to redo the toy thing as we're talking, or do I want to continue going? And I kind of want to continue going because I think I'd mentioned
Go for
too.
it.
I think I'd mentioned too that like um in my mind I think I was creating more scenarios that were actually in the story. Like
Everybody
I
does
was like
that.
I was like there was a fire. I wonder if it was because they were tinkering with the toy and they set it on fire and they're actually the ones who started the fire in the bathroom. Maybe that's it. And then and you were like, no.
Yeah, it's like I wish, it's like a lot of times some of the things that we brought up was kind of like, hey, this would be cool to flesh out, but we don't
Yeah.
have the money or the time.
Hmm.
For the time.
Yeah.
But like no, when I was designing even the first part, I had to make things I had to create opportunities for like obviousness
Hmm.
that I had originally not put in because and this is something that I learned when I was like doing design for escape rooms. I've never had an escape room like finished, but I did have to design for practice and people will when given a simple solution assume it's much more complex than it actually is,
Hmm.
so you have to complicate the simplicity by making them go and do a bunch of things, but really like the solution is just put the key in the lock and turn. Yeah, I had one friend, I don't know if she's like watching, but she like kept messaging me as because she was doing the play testing, being like, okay, I think I found him. I was like, who? They're like, the man down by the river that's responsible for stealing the dog. And I was like, what man? There is no man. He's not by the river.
Yeah,
She's like, I just need to find him. Do I go through the bushes? I'm like, no.
you know, I
It
kind
was
of,
great.
I mean, I didn't think there was a man by the river, but I kept thinking, am I just not getting to the river? I'm like, where's the river? And I was like, wait, is it on the side there? But I kept trying to go down, and I was like, maybe I need to go down in a different way, but I can't seem to go down, and I'm not finding the right path. So I was like trying to go down like throughout the whole bottom, and then eventually I was like, I don't think you can go down. But I was trying real hard, so yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why we put that blocker up because I was like, people are going to try to go in there and they're going to die and they're going to be
Hmm.
stuck.
Fall through
So
the
it's like there's
world.
an invisible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do have some very nice frogs though, thanks to our
We do, yes.
amazing
Oh
sound
yeah, the
guy
frogs.
Paul. Yeah.
I think it is. I think it's like the sound. The sounds are almost trying to like entrap you into going down there, and you're like, "Oh, I want to go see the frogs." Yeah, and
Yeah.
then it's like,
He
nope.
It is,
he added that one on his own. I was just like, oh my god, that's perfect.
yes.
Okay, I'm gonna continue on my game. I'm gonna start it up.
Right.
There we go. I'm already in
Ooh.
the hallway. I don't know if you can see it. All right. Yeah, so we also talked about the language and how like even when I was reading it, I was like I wasn't too sure what it was at first, and I'm like, "Oh, wait, I know what this is now." So then I was able to pronounce it. But we talked about how this is like a dystopian, like, future world, and how language evolves over time and through people and stuff like that. So how can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this is like a conversation I've been having on and off with various people on the team, even before Sade showed up, about, I am not a good or fluent speaker. And I had dealt with a lot of, I think, too much teasing for my accent. So I was getting like really insecure about how should I just not do language in the game? And that upset me because it was so important to me to actually, like, even with what limited resources I had, present that in the game. Because I did want to create a future where I want to spend time, and I want to spend time in a future where there is language everywhere. That's just like, that is a thing I desire. And kind of around the time Sade came on, I was still having these worries, and we talked, and it was just like, just go for it. Like, whatever. You're Even if you were super fluent, I think we talked about this too. Even if I was super fluent, there is going to be somebody who's like, that's not how I say it. That's not how we write it. Like, and I was like, yeah, because there's a million ways, and there's, hundreds, if not, I think there's probably like thousands of dialects of Indigenous languages inside each family. Like, there are super, super specific regional dialects and whatnot. So we kind of took the position of, okay, let's just imagine right now, this is it. This is the only, like, what I can get on the internet, and who I know I can talk to. That's your resources. This is the language. That's all. Where does that go? If we're insistent on that, yes, we will continue speaking Cree. This is mostly a swampy Cree, but it is a little bit like pull things here and there. I think I called it Creelish or Nawish, because it is kind of using English words to create new words. It uses English, but with Cree grammar occasionally, and then it uses Cree with English grammar. We just kind of were like, let's just look at what this could be like. And originally I had gone a lot harder on the language, and when I tested it with people, they couldn't understand at all. So I had to pull back. So that when we ended up doing was almost like a bookcasing. So I will start with language, and sometimes I'll end with language. I may throw a word in the middle of a sentence, but usually it's the way I put it in. You should get a context just from the way it's being used. And if not, I usually, with those words, I try not to change the spelling from what could be easily found through a Google search, just to make it a little bit easier on people. But like, one of the things Sade and I talked about a lot is just, the inherent colonization of the Latin letters and the way that they are used to spell, and that, the way we see it, it's French pronunciation, which, like, that doesn't make any sense. If you're living in like English Canada, then you're not going to be able to like pronounce that word by looking at it. So we've played around with like, let's do the word but with English pronunciation spelling, and that was like, some people were okay with that. Other people were like, I don't know what this is. I can't Google it. I was like, So if it was too difficult or it wasn't a common word, then I tended to stick with the French spelling, just because I was like, it's our first game. We don't know how people will receive this anyways. So let's like not make it super difficult.
As one of the things too of thinking about language is like, this game is set in a far-flung future, so much like our own languages, where we have lost so much and we're relying on incomplete knowledge, essentially, of what was before and what was after. We have to make up all new words all the time. So in this future of this world, you would have people who essentially took what was available, and it would be fractured, of course. And, there would be things that would just be made new, and just a chance to, like, one of the things we try to do is like kind of come up with our own little bit of slang too. So it's like, so some things are just sort of like, oh, it's like, why does that sound a little bit weird? It's like, because we decided that was a slang. So it's like, so if you run across something, you're just like, what is this? They're like, oh, it's probably a piece of slang that we made up. So that's one of the things. Like, actually, one of the little Oskosima, he's got a little slang piece of tree on his shirt, and it's just one of those things where like it's in an internal document. We'll probably never see it or understand what it means, but it's just like to us it has a meaning. Like there's a whole like lore that we have that unfortunately people won't get to see because we just didn't have the time and money.
Is there a possibility to do like more and like even do like a re-release or like a director's cut kind of person of a game?
I think we said if we manage to do well enough for ourselves and we hit like a 5-year anniversary, and we don't have enough going on, we'll remake it. But we have a lot of games we want to also make, and we also have like sequels we would like to make.
Yeah. Wow. And so I'm just playing along, and I'm like a part of me is like I want to talk and listen, but also I'm playing. So originally my plan was that during our film festival, because we just had our 30th year anniversary, we were at the library and they have computer labs there, and they also have this big screen out in their lobby, and I was gonna play this as the demo, and then their tech person emailed me and said, it's rated M, and that goes against our library policy. We can't actually purchase the game, because they were going to purchase them and put them on the computers and do all that stuff. And I was like, oh. And then I was confused a little bit because in my mind I thought, I played this already? I mean, I played a little bit already and I couldn't see why it was M. But then I think we talked about this too, that we knew that it was going to start talking about like possibly like missing and murdered Indigenous women and just the context of what's happening, not the content of like, oh, there's going to be like gore and things like that. Like it wasn't that. It was just the context of the conversation of what it was about. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, it was stuff we were gonna want to talk about anyways. A lot of it is kind of our attempt to navigate and explore and just sort of present in some cases where we feel like there's not a lot we can say in the context we've given ourselves about crap I've been through and that we've all kind of been through. It was important for me though, because I have not directly had that experience of losing somebody, but at the same time it's like you can't get away from it. Somebody who knows somebody, or you will know somebody who had that happen to them. And so we did want to talk about that, about how it kind of like all encompasses the culture right now. And it is like we go cheesy a lot because it's a hard topic to talk about. I think that was one of the things that drew me to noir, is just it's hokey sometimes. It's got camp to it, even when they're trying to be incredibly serious. And you think about it, and for me, that helped me actually get through a lot of these stories, because a lot of noir stories are about some pretty messed up stuff. And usually it's around being unwanted by society, or being or society actively wanting you gone. And the cheese does make it easier to kind of stomach discussing that stuff. But that doesn't take away from the fact that it's still going to have a lot of mature themes and a lot of mature talking. I know people are probably going to play it and be like, it doesn't really deserve an M, but I have some really strong feelings about how we relegate things that have just nudity and gore. Are those the only things that should be rated M? Where it's like, I really don't think 14-year-olds or even maybe 16-year-olds should be playing this. Not because I don't think they will get nothing out of it, but because like I just feel like sometimes these are things where if you're going to be that young and play this, it would probably be good to have somebody that you can talk to about it afterwards. That and I mean, like I know what it's like to kind of be like, I'm an adult. But I did make this for Indigenous women, and I did kind of make this for, like, 18. Really, the idea was like sort of 17, 18 plus. So I'm not really, to me, I'm like 25 is an adult. That's when you're really an adult. So I still think this is sort of for like young adults. But yeah, it's I guess Sade can talk about it better. Sometimes I think about it, I'm just like, was I being overly cautious? But then I'm like, I don't know. There's some pretty messed up stuff in here.
Yeah, so a lot of our stuff it's not, there's not like violence or gore like on screen, so it's not like an obvious M rating in sort of that way. And even language, we don't do a lot of cussing in the game. But it is like the context of the conversation the game is having. So it is a lot of that same, these are hard conversations, and younger players may not be ready for that, or their parents may not be ready to have that explanation with them because of that. So yeah, this is it's more erring on the side of caution in that sense. So
yeah, and I mean, if a child is going to play it, at least then they go in knowing that it's mature content and that they're kind of forewarned that there's going to be stuff. And yeah, they might walk away from me like, I didn't get any of that, because they haven't had experiences that would key them into some of the stuff that we're talking about. But like, I grew up with the dawn of the internet, and there was lots of stuff I was exposed to that it really should have had a mature rating. Even if I was going to consume it anyways, I would have liked to know, because there was a lot of exploring concepts while using childish themes or language, because people wanted to talk about things in a way that felt safe to them. But that meant that me as a child was consuming that uncritically, not realizing that, like, no, this is media for adults trying to have a very serious conversation, and I'm consuming a lot of content that I don't have anyone to talk to about. And I think that left me in a lot of spaces, and I know others who've kind of been through the same thing, where they were like, I just exposed to too much, and it made me a little weird, and it made it harder to have those conversations later when I was mature enough to have those conversations, because some of it is really traumatizing, even if it doesn't feel like it is.
Well, there's a concept called I don't know what it's called, but it's actually a term called like secondhand trauma. Basically, it doesn't happen to you, but if you hear about it and it's traumatizing, like, it's still traumatizing to you because you're not in a space to even like learn about it yet. It's too much for you. So in that sense, yeah, you can be traumatized even though it doesn't actually happen to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, if you think about it, how long has it been since we've been able to see things happening to other people who aren't really in the room? It hasn't been that long. Your brain assumes you're there. Like, even if you consciously, intellectually know, oh, I'm not in that room, I'm not there, your deeper brain's like, I don't know that. So I'm just going to take in this lesson and be extra careful, because that's a bad thing that's happening to that person who is close enough that I can watch it. Sorry, you're gonna say something.
Yeah,
that's okay. My brain totally went squirrel on me, and I lost the train. I think it's
all right.
Yeah. No problem.
No, it's just one of those things where it's just like I had a thought, and then the wheel turned. I was like, oh, I have no idea. I get the squirrel moments a lot, unfortunately.
I know it happens to me all the time. So you did all the art design like yourself, or did you have like a team that was helping you?
So I did the 2D art design, and we had a 3D artist who came on, and she handled a lot of the initial environment designs and setup. She left the project, and then we had two young people come in, and they kind of helped take over some of like environmental designs, character stuff. That's stuff I did. A lot of the UI art is mine, so Meagan's. So it's like a team effort between 4 or 5 people, and my job is essentially as the art lead is just to make sure that we're kind of fitting in the mold of what we have and making sure that everyone is meeting Meagan's vision. So, as far as like what the world should be. And then other times she was just like, I need you to make a decision on this because I don't have the capacity to deal with this right now. So you decide. And I'm like, okay, well, I think this part's okay, so let's go.
Yeah, I think the only thing I needed to step in on was like the dumbest thing, which was just the click and hover. But that's just because, okay, that will make or break some people's play experience if like that click and hover is annoying. And I remember like poor Paul, he was like, I don't understand. I'm like, I know you don't. Just like
Yeah.
just trust the process and go with my
Yeah.
crazy thing. Now what I want is the feeling of electric static over. He's like, oh my god, why are you doing this?
And the one of the big things too, talk about Paul, like that's cool, but also Jasmine she fleshed out a lot of the actual environments. So having her kind of step in and take over like set decoration in spaces that were still pretty empty really fleshed out the world. Like there's a section of the game you'll get to a little bit later called the visitor area, or I forget what we call it, district, entertainment district. A lot of that is sort of like, we refer to it as a couple different things, sort of like what the locals and what the Risen City will refer to it as. And she took over a lot of the ownership on that design, especially. So like there's some really cool things that she's like, oh, I thought it needed this, and yeah, it was awesome.
Oh yeah, she just got stuff that Sade and I had never really properly articulated. Like, if you kind of go out and talk to Bato, you can travel off to a new area, and then that was kind of the space, what do we call it? The public housing space, and she just understood how to make it both comfortable but also a little bit closer to what the Risen City was like. So in the game, the public housing area is basically for those which are called like the rejected or the fallen, which are basically expelled citizens from the Risen City who kind of have nowhere to go. And Amanaski, the city, the council has basically agreed to let them kind of like stay in this area. And then they can either like go off and find their fortune, or they can choose to become naturalized citizens, or if they want to pick up a trade, they can go and ask and become adopted into one of the clans. And that's all set up for them, but that public housing is kind of like the first housing situation they get when they're first kind of like just dumped on the doorstep of the city. And it's very much a space that's designed for Risen City citizens. So it's not as lush. It's a little bit more structured. It's mostly, straight lines and a little bit sanitized because that's what they're used to. And you understand that once you kind of go up, because that's how I kind of vision, how people who would be put in that situation would be cared of under a sovereign nation, is that, we will house you, we will clothe you and feed you and water you, but also like we want you to be comfortable. We want you to, acclimatize to this space from where you've been, because hospitality is so important in Cree culture, and for me, and in Mohawk culture too, like that you're a good host. And I was like, the public housing is your first indication that like this is a good host that cares about people who've been kind of like aren't really their responsibility but have been made their responsibility.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we don't get to delve into as far as like the clan systems and like different things that had exist in our lore, but
Politics.
The politics of it, the things that like we wanted to kind of put in there. And there's a few things where you get to see like in the, we call it the tutorial section, you'll talk to the Omasina. He's like a writer. Yeah. is he refers to his daughter. There's a section where he's just like, "Oh, I'm thinking about having such and such clan. You know, maybe take her on as an apprentice." And it's like, "Oh, there's a clan system." And then you'll meet an elderly fallen citizen who also is, you know, just when you see his bio, it's just like, "Oh, he's been around so long, no one even remembers who adopted him." You know, and that's sort of the idea. Is, you know, this has been happening for a while, and you know, there are people who have been living in the society, and even though they weren't originally, you know, of the city, they become members of society, because that's what we do, you know, as Indigenous people. We take people in, and you know, some people get all, you know, however, whatever about it, but you know, our people, like as a Chicago, you know, Mohawks, Six Nations, just in general, we have these systems in our political system, like, to bring people into our society, even if they aren't, you know, born into it. So, you know, so the idea of citizenship is not immutable for us. So, like, I like that in our game too. It's like the idea of that, you know, even though there's these people who are rejected and unwanted in the society, if they want to be, they can, you know, come into the society, or, you know, they can, you know, do their own thing.
Sure. One of the things that I noticed about the game when I was playing it the first time, and I'm just reminded now, is how there's the option to be like nice, and then also being like a little bit like not rude, but you know, like playful. Because in Indigenous humor is really hard. Sometimes you have to have a thick skin, because if we're not teasing you and making fun of you, we don't like you. You know, if we are making fun of you, it means we like you. So I think that's a little bit of humor that I think not a lot of people get, and they get really offended, and you're like, no, that means they like you.
Yeah.
And
if an Indigenous person is polite to you, they cannot stand you, and you need to change something.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah. It ain't them, it's you.
So it's like one of those things where it's like you have the option of being like, yeah, it's cool, yeah, I'll help you. It's like, well, why they ask that? Or, oh my god, you know, it's just weird, kind of like you have this choice of being like a little bit like with a little bit of attitude, and you can also, or you could just be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Like, you know, just nice. Was that a conscious effort, or is that like with the three options? Like, because it's usually 2 or 3 options with the choice of like what to respond. Is that like a conscious effort?
Oh yeah. 100%. So like, Hill is, how do we describe her? She is a
grumpy old man.
A young grumpy old man, was born the wrong era. She needed to, it's just like, basically has all the charm of an 80-year-old old dude who has a wood shop in the back. But like, it obviously turn it on when she needs to. And so for me, it was really important that Hill be a character, not somebody you insert yourself into and then play however. So the options are all her. Like, she won't say things that she wouldn't say as a character. You just kind of get to be that little, like, am I going to be nice? Am I going to tease? Or am I going to just be straight up rude? Which is like an option a lot of times. And then there's going to be some times where, like, that you don't really even get a choice there because of the dialogue tree that you went down, where if Hill's getting heated, the nice version usually flows out the window, and if she gets really upset, then the sort of calm option just disappears, and now you're like, either you can exit and try that over again, which we kind of left as an option, or you can just see where this yellow brick road goes.
Yeah, because I think I went down that tree, because I started out being very nice, and I was even trying to be nice to the kids when I was asking them questions. And then when I was even getting frustrated. I was like, okay, listen, just tell me what I need to know and stop giving me attitude.
Oh yeah. There's like other stuff that I don't know if people are gonna pick up on, like that you need to pay attention to who the person is that you're talking to, because some options will not work for them. They will not give you the right answer. They will not give you an honest answer because they don't feel like you're being honest with them. So if you're, and that's hard to know, because sometimes you have to take a risk. You don't know which option will actually kind of direct them. I do try to make it like clear how characters are going to respond to certain types of dialogue earlier, but sometimes you kind of have to like anything, you got to take a risk, or you have to pay really, really close attention to who you're talking to.
So one of the early
The kids are a good example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's say Bato as well. Like I enjoy talking to him as Hill, because their relationship is like lore wise, like they serve together. They're comrades, and so they are very terse with each other, but it's with bemused love and mild annoyance. Because that's what all good friendships are. It's like, hey, I love you, but I also hate your ass. It's that sort of thing.
Annoying effer.
But I'll do anything for you. Oh, hey, we're having dinner. So it's like
and then the fact that like Hill will defend Bato, sort of, I guess in her own way. But with the kids, they kind of each have their own type of Hill that they respond better to, and they're not all the same. And again, it's like, you never know.
That was actually one of the things I really liked the most about our game, was the fact that we did stick Indigenous kids in it. A lot of these kind of, a lot of point-and-click adventures, more mature titles, it's just adults, or you might have like one annoying kid who shows up. We have four annoying kids.
They were so expensive.
Yeah. But the thing about it is, like, when you grow up in Indigenous communities, like, we always have kids around. It's like, and they are a big part of the family. And like, believe it or not, like, they're a great source of information a lot of times too. So like, this makes sense, just sort of in the universe. Like, true, like this one setup is pretty low risk, as far as like consequences, but the fact that they're even in the game, and a chance to like say, especially with what's being revealed about residential schools, that was a big kind of conscious choice on our part. It was like, we need to have Indigenous children in here to show that this is a society of people who are living and trying to thrive in like these situations. So
one of
tattoos.
Tattoos.
That was sorry. Tattoos. That was a whole thing.
One of the things that I think is kind of good too about the noir kind of feel is because it is like black and white, with like obviously there's like little bits of color, like even with like the little like the phone tablet thing and stuff, is a thing that we kind of suffer in our community, which is like colorism, which in a black and white noir you're not really going to have that, because even like the other people of color in here, you get that they're people of color, but you're not fixated on like, oh, this person's this shade, or oh, that person's really white passing, you know what I mean? Like there's no kind of like option for that. Is that something that just like a happy accident, or was that like a conscious choice as well?
That was a conscious choice, like on my part, a lot of it. Meagan was just like, she's like, I have these characters that we need to do, and I'm just sort of like, it's like, well, I went in and I'm like, okay, well, this character should be maybe a little bit more light-skinned, and this character should be dark-skinned, maybe this person is like Afro-Indigenous, and that was a conscious choice on my part. Like, I intentionally made Oski and her mom Afro-Indigenous, because a lot of what's happening in Indigenous communities now, especially on the internet, like Twitter, is goddamn cesspool. People are just like, oh, Afro-Indigenous people aren't Indigenous because they're African. It's just like, hey man, these are our people now. It doesn't matter if they weren't then. They are now. And me growing up as being like part Mexican, we caught a lot of flack for that when we would admit that, because we get called, beaner and stuff all the time. And it's just like, for a long time I never mentioned it, and it's just, as I get older, I'm just like, this is half of my family that I can't, just throw away because people want to make fun of me when I was little. So, it's like realizing that you do exist in two worlds, and that's like this game is like, these people exist in two worlds. And the idea that in a future where an Indigenous society is growing, that won't be an issue for them anymore when they have external issues to deal with. So no one treats them differently than they would in our game than they would like just regular family, because they are regular family.
Yeah, because there's no benefit. Like in this society, there's no benefit. And actually, kind of when we got into talking about how did we want to actually represent kind of colorism and hierarchy in the Risen City citizens, we went with like their tattoos. Their tattoos are colored. And it's not totally brought attention all the time. You kind of pick up on it. That was, again, it was stuff that like we kind of had to end up cutting. But, you know, one of the things was the fact that like Mary is probably one of the highest level colors. And the way she talks about other citizens, I think reflects that she does have this elitist attitude, even if she is a nice person. And then, yeah, so like, I maybe could have gone a little harder. I kind of wanted Mary to be kind of irritating from the beginning and like grow on you, but apparently she was too irritating in my original design, so I like pared that back. I think it's because we had to also cut scope in terms of how long you were going to be spending with her, so I was like, okay, maybe like make her a little bit less grating immediately. But yeah, no, she's basically an elitist snob.
Yeah, but she doesn't, you know, she doesn't think she is. That's the, you know, that's the thing.
Because she's a good person.
Yeah. It's like, I'm a good person. I do good things. I never look down at anyone that doesn't deserve to be looked down on.
I have a sister who's like a red, you know.
Yeah, yeah, it's that situation.
Yeah.
It's like we all know someone like that. Yeah, so like the Risen City definitely is more of like it's that hierarchical society. So like I said, with the colors of their wrist tattoo, that sort of denotes where they are in the society. Even though we don't get to show a lot of that, it exists in the lore.
I mean, yeah,
definitely.
You can use it for your fanfics.
I think also you spend more time with people who are rejected, so that's a different layer of snobbery, like that we mostly were interested in. I think for me, I was less interested in the intricacies of like colorisms in the Risen City citizenship, and I was more interested in like how do they basically react to their homeless. Because that's essentially who the fallen and the rejected are. There are the homeless of the Risen City, and they are definitely treated by Mary as like, oh, it's a lovely person, but I don't, you know, you must have done something wrong, right? Yeah. Like you wouldn't have been homeless if you could just like, you know, be a good citizen. So it must have been your fault. Like there's definitely that vibe that we go for.
Yeah, they have, you know, like the Risen Citizens, you'll see them when you don't get too close to them, but they have the same tattoo, but it doesn't have any color to it. It's essentially been turned off. And that denotes there's, you know, position in society. When you talk to Mima, I made sure to show his hands, his tattoos are black. There's no color to them because he's an unwanted citizen. So that's in the character designs when you see them. It's something maybe not everyone's going to pick up on, but it's there.
Well, so anyone in chat, if you have a question, feel free to ask it in the chat, and we can also ask them as well. Just FYI, if you have any questions, I know people are commenting in the chat specifically, but yeah. So this was your first, well, not your first game, but Meagan's. I'm trying to pronounce it right. Meagan's first game. So, like,
well, I mean, this is my first game with my studio.
Okay.
I did work. Yeah, I worked in other things. I mostly worked in like gamification and children's edutainment. So I have like, I've done that. So this would be like my first like serious adult game.
I realized I was listening and reading, but wasn't really reading, and I was like, shoot, where was I supposed to go? I'm like, I think I'm supposed to go to the morgue. Because so Mary also was it a because it's more of the dialogue pops up, so unless I read it, then people have to read along with me, unless I read to them the dialogue. Was there something that like was that always your first choice to do that, or like what kind of made you decide to do that, or maybe have like voice actors? Because I guess that would be like a lot.
So voice acting would have cost the total amount of what it cost to make the game, just for the voice acting.
Yeah, double the cost of what. Yeah, voice actors are not cheap.
They're not cheap. They're unionized in Canada, which is like not a problem. But most of the expense would go to human power, and not just the voice actors. It would also have gone to like we would have had to have a director. We would have had to have like an editor. We would have had to have like that set up in our sound system. That would have been its own testing. So yeah. Also with sound or voiceover, you have to have your script locked like several months before the game is done and launches, and like that was not going to happen as much as I wanted it to.
Well, I've seen it a lot with a lot of games, like even ones that have like huge budgets, and like now they kind of do, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So I guess it really depends. I don't know. There's one game that I play that will do it, and like I'm like click 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 move on, and then it'll still play as I'm like walking around. So I usually just listen to it as it's like walking. But yeah, I could see how that would be like a big like a time commitment. Ooh, and then there's the logo of
Indigenous Game Devs.
Game Devs. You know what's so funny? I've been in there a while. I didn't know both of you were in there.
Yeah.
So I've run it.
Yeah. So here's the funny thing. I actually made that logo.
Oh, you made this logo?
Yeah, I did. Beth LaPonce asked me if I would make a logo for Indigenous Game Devs. And I was just like, oh, and I got an idea. Let me throw it together. And it's a little hard to tell there, but it's all done vector art, and I hand placed every little thing like little bead shapes, and I hand placed every one like I was actually beading a beaded medallion, like a crazy person. I didn't have to do that, but it felt very important to me that I did it specifically that way. And I feel like it definitely feels more like a hand beaded game controller, and like just a twisted coil medallion.
It looks like a medallion. So my follow-up question would be then, have you gotten this medallion made?
No, not yet.
No.
Wow. No. If there's any beaters in here.
So my brother's actually a really good beater too. Like if I paid him some money, he would do it for me. But it's one of those things where it's like I don't wear a lot of jewelry, so I would feel weird about it. But if one were to exist, if someone were to make one and it were to exist, that'd be pretty awesome. But yeah,
done. Then you get a matching hat.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like just for your good, like this is my good going out to the festivals costume. Gotta use your good meeting voice.
Gotta use
real sacred meeting, right? Council, running for council.
Some more kids playing in the park. Oh, the ball moves.
Yeah, that was
the
fun. Yeah. That was the technical artist.
Yes, Adam.
Will there be Hill Agency merch available?
Oh man.
Question.
So we're in a weird spot right now where we actually are still waiting on funding we're supposed to be getting for all of our marketing and PR. So that's why we've been so quiet. Well, that, and also like the patches will not stop. Like, why do I keep finding bugs that weren't there before? But like, so we're kind of in this weird spot where we're probably not going to be able to do anything until June. But yeah, we do want to have merch. We've got like, so far we've got stickers, which I thought turned out really beautiful. They're all of Sade's art of the character profiles for, I guess, the main 6 from the tutorial. And then, yeah, we'll probably look at other things. There are things that we were like, oh, it would be really cool to like partner with like a beater and have them do a design for us, and then we'll pay them to like make the design, but then we'll make the beading pattern like a PDF that's available for people to like buy for like maybe $2 or $5 or something like that. Because one of the things we wanted to do was like, can we make Indigenous merch? Like, not just sort of like plushies and stuff. Like, can we make stuff that literally Indigenous people would be excited to have because it would be beaded, or it could be like quilled or something like that. Which, like, obviously it makes it more expensive, but at the same time, you know, I like merch, but I also recognize that a lot of it is just like cheap and disposable, and you don't really find a lot of it precious. And to me, like, so my very first piece of fan art, or I guess merch, that I ever got from a fan was for my very first game, Achimostawinan Lost, and it was a little clay sculpture of the main character, and I cherished the hell out of that thing. And I would love to have made, you know, like a limited edition of those and sell them for like $25 or like $30, like that kind of stuff. But yeah, we'll probably play around. I also like the idea of, instead of like making merch for you to sell, giving you patterns or giving you 3D print, you know, files that, like, if you want to take that to your local makerspace and print out like maybe a clear or, you know, colored hill model, and then paint it, like, you know. And I love that kind of stuff. I love stuff that like is bespoke and people want to keep for a while because they really love the, you know, the project or the story.
Well, I think
As right now I see where you're at in the game, and I just love to comment that I just love how tiny Mary looks compared
yes,
to Hill and Bato.
Yeah.
I thought it was a child at first, and I was like, oh no, that's Mary. Wow, she's
No,
tiny.
no, she's tiny. The height differentials are very intentional.
Yeah.
Hill is unusually tall for a character, and like her and Bato are in game are technically about 6 foot in US measurements. So
Wow.
And I think Wob is only slightly taller than the two of them.
Yeah, which is funny because Bato was supposed to be taller than all of them, but he got a little shrunk.
He's squat king.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to talk about the merch. So I mean, there's a lot of program or places that you can do that you can make it, and you just put on the image, and then people can just purchase the items themselves, like on T-shirts or like game. My brother is one of those people. I have a brother who, like, he calls himself like a swag person.
Yeah.
And if it has a logo on it and it's from someone, he wants it. Like, I had a Twitch sweater, and he was like already messaging me going, oh, you're gonna lose that soon. Like, he was already trying to steal my sweater. I'm like, oh. And like, he's like so happy. You could get him anything with any logo or something on it, and it has any sort of swag, and he just loves it. He just wants all the swag stuff. But yeah, like, I played a few games, and I have one of them that I play is called Knockout City, and one of the things is little dodgeballs. So I have a little one and I have a bigger one, but it has like a little stand, and yeah, it's like a dodgeball with just their logo on it, you know. And it's like,
that's so cute.
It's so cute though. I was like, yes, give me the thing. But yeah, merch is one of those things that I think it also gives people like a little piece of the game to have with them, and so it's always something that just kind of helps with building the community and people that really like things.
So there actually was a small set of pins that I ran, like little clear acrylic pins, and it was like a little promo thing. through one of like those print-on-demand places, and it was like 50 pins for $19. And I was going to Indigipop X in Oklahoma City, and I wanted to bring some stuff from Hill Agency, so I ended up printing up, just like a announcement board. It's like, hey, games come out, March 31st, and then put the little QR code for the Steam. And it's just like, hey, if you scan this with your Steam thing, I'm like, I had like little cards that people could take away, just stuff to give away. And when they went and hit it with the QR code, I'm just like, hey man, have a pin. And it's like, there's only 50 of them that exist. So they weren't the greatest, but they were pretty cool. People liked them.
I mean, if you told me there's only 50 and exist, I'd be like, I want one, please. Thank you. Hi, Juby. Yeah, I think it is. Like, I think once you kind of like get, especially like emotionally invested in something, you just want some part of it with you. Yeah. Pins are great. Like I said, there are programs out there that you can just basically upload it and then people can download. They could do stickers, they could do pins, they can do books, they can even do like bedspreads. You just upload the art and then people just download them. And it really depends. Some of them are a little bit different, but some of them have like you could also choose the quality as well. You could also I know there's some that do like environment friendly, if that makes sense. Like, so it's like biodegradable. They're usually more expensive, but yeah. Again, the cost is then on the person whether or not they're willing to pay that much insurance or whatever. But yeah. So that's pretty interesting. I'm just running out of questions. I'm like, chat, do you have any questions? wait. Oh, I guess have you both played? I mean, obviously you've designed it, you've done all the work, you wrote all the stories. Have you, since its launch, tried to like play it through yourself?
So I've actually been playing it to break it. So that's mostly been my purpose in run-throughs lately. Is like just like I'm looking for places that we get stuck, and I'm just like, okay, that's not good. So not for the enjoyment yet, but
not yet.
I'll be there.
Probably will be. Yeah, I think it'll probably be a year before I can just play it for enjoyment. I just know too much, and I've been staring at it for a while, and it gets hard to enjoy. I think every dev talks about this after they finish. It's like it is hard for a little while to like actually enjoy the experience of playing your own game, because you've just been staring at it for so long. You can't not see its faults. Or like, oh, I should have done this, or oh, I should have done that, and you're like, it is what it is. It's done. It's like I get the same thing when I like read anything else I've written. Like I do plays, and sometimes like I cannot read it. I'm just like, nope, been staring at this for too long. I'll walk away and I'll come back. So usually I think a year or so is when I'm like, okay, I've had some space.
Yeah.
I will now enjoy this.
Yeah, it's like I haven't looked at any of the reviews yet, so like. I don't know if there's a lot of them, but I intentionally haven't been looking at any of that stuff on any of the like
8.
We need 2 more.
Ooh,
where
2 more.
Were the reviews like on Steam or?
Yeah, we're also on itch.io, but that seems to be for people who are family who don't actually want to play the game, but are real excited to help us out.
And they're like,
you don't need an account. Yeah.
Okay. They're like, you're doing great. I loved it. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And you're like, thanks, Mom.
Which is like lovely. Like I don't disregard that at all. It does help. It is like, I guess, this weird spot where we're in, where it's like we're going commercial, so that does, and it's PC, so that kind of means Steam. And yeah, Steam has this thing where you need 10 reviews for it to kind of like start offering up your game in people's recommendations. And then I think you need to hit like something crazy, like not crazy, but crazy for an indie, like $250,000 US for it to start showing up on that ticker. And also there's like, you kind of have a window in which to hit that number before they're like, oh, well, no, you don't get to be in the ticker.
You know what's funny is actually on the Steam thing, I actually saw on our the home shop page, it's like it's listed as featured, and I was just like okay,
Oh.
where? And I tried to hunt it down and I couldn't find it.
Oh, I didn't see that either.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also yeah, if we're in events though, that'll show up on the front page and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll be in a bunch of events over the summer. If you've been waiting, that's when the sales are.
What about an art book in the future with the lore?
Oh my god, yeah, Sade already has draft pages for this. We have to go through and make sure we get everything though.
Yeah, a lot of art.
A lot of art.
The funniest part is it feels like, you know, when I see the finished product, I'm like, it doesn't feel like that much art. Then I go back through my files and there's so much.
So much. Yeah. There's a lot. Also, we went through, before we landed with Aretha Lewis, who we have to shout out to, did all the Indigenous character models. She's Indigenous, West Coast Salish from in Vancouver. She's actually notable because she is the modeler who did Spider-Noir in Into the Spider-Verse. So she's been in the industry for a while. She's really cool. So yeah, if you haven't, check her out, Aretha Lewis.
She also did the turtle in Super Pets.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm horrible with spelling. How do you spell the name?
Oh my god.
Anyone
I'll say
know?
Maritza,
Do you have
it's Marit. Is it Z or S-A?
Z?
Z, yeah, Maritza. And
Z-A?
Yeah. Z-A.
Yeah.
And then does Lewis have an I in it? It's like Louis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Louis.
Yes.
Louis.
Louis.
Lewis.
Yeah. And she's on Instagram and everything too. So
L-O-U-W?
I.
No, just I.
Lewis. Like as in Lewis and Clark?
L-E...
I thought it was the French spelling of Lewis.
Sorry. Yeah, I thought it was Lewis, like L-O-U-I-S. Louis. Louis.
Oh, now she's gonna be mad at me because I can't remember. She's gonna see this and be like, I thought we were friends.
Right.
Okay, this may or may not be the spelling.
I'm pretty sure it's Lewis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
actually,
like
I just
like
pulled up her. I just
Okay.
pulled up her Instagram too. So yeah, it's Louis.
Okay, it is the first one. Okay.
I win friendship bingo. But we went through like 3 or 4 3D modelers before her, and it was just like none of them could get Hill right. It was so, to me, I think, I don't know how you felt, Sade, but for me it was really frustrating. And then finally having an Indigenous person work on it, I don't know if that was the difference. I think it was, because the one thing that like nobody could get right were the eyes. Just everybody did something crazy different, and it was like really hard to explain. And I was just like, and even Sade, you did like a 4, like you did like profile, front, 3/4, top, like you like tried to get it all.
Yeah.
Yep.
And people struggled. And then Maritza looks at it and she's like, oh, I just need like the front and the profile. And bam, just was like out, done. So like she, just because she understood, made less work for Sade.
Because also with her, like, she was really excited, like, being able to create Indigenous characters, like in a game, yeah, but like just the ability to create Indigenous characters for any reason, she was really excited about, because you know she works in film and TV and stuff, and like they it's not usually the kind of thing that they're doing. So a chance to, you know, just really indig out, just kind of was really nice. She appreciated that. Like her whole team was pretty nice to work with, and you know, it was a you know, it was really exciting. And the fun thing is, like, since she's on the West Coast, and I also am on the West Coast. It turns out she's related to a bunch of people I know, so so it was almost like, you know, Indian country cousins. So that was fun.
I remember I was telling someone one time that I was like, we were talking about something and they're like, how do you know they don't do this? And I was like, you know, to be honest, we actually aren't a huge community. I mean, we are a huge community, but we're also, like, in the context of the world, we're also not. So if I don't know this person, I will know someone who knows them who know them. Or, you know, like, it's usually not too far of a separation for me to find out who they are.
Yeah.
And I find that happens a lot in our community, especially when you work in the same industries, like in media or things like that as well. So even if you don't know them, it's like very thin line of not knowing them and knowing them.
It was funny because, like, before I got into video games, I used to work in emergency services on the Colville Confederate Reservation in Washington State, and one of the guys that I worked with was rather, you know, big burly guy named Del Ostenberg, and you know, he worked like arson prevention, all sorts of stuff for the BIA and for the tribe, and you go just like the most random place in the country and be like, "Oh, do you know Del?" I'm like, "How do you know Del?" You know, it's that sort of thing. It's just, if someone mentions his name, I'm just like, "How on earth do you?" And it's just, you know, like you said, like, Indigenous community, Indian country, whatever you want to call it, it's really small, and like we all just kind of eventually know a lot of people who also know a lot of people, and then, you know, it's just like, oh, so and so knows. Oh, it's like, are they cool? It's like, yeah, all right, cool, and we're cool. Are they cool? No. All right.
I every time I
whisper
meet
that
somebody,
bird.
right? Also, like, I look dead just like my uncle, so, and he's in theater, so I get a lot of like, are you so and so's daughter, you know, sister, niece? And I was like, yeah, that's me. Which that's, I don't know how I feel about the fact that I look the most like my uncle.
I remember when I was in junior high, someone came up to me and went, I saw your brother at the mall. And I'm like, what? And he's like, I'm like, how do you know it was my brother? And she was like, because they're basically look like you, except if you were a male. And I was like, okay. All right, sure.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, where were they going? And they're like, oh, they were going into a store called Ali's T-shirts. And I'm like, that was my brother. Because he loves that store.
Yeah.
I'm like, it was my brother.
Oh my God, yeah. It's...
yeah, so it was pretty funny. So we had another question. So a person asked, who funds, so I don't know a lot about creating games. Who funds making them? So how did you get funding to do this project?
Cried a lot. No, so we're in Canada. We're pretty lucky, or sorry, the company's based in Canada, in Ontario. So we're pretty lucky in that there's a couple of funding agencies. You can go the Arts Council route, but if you do that, you can't be a corporation, and it gets messy about what you can and cannot do with the product once you're done, because video games are still pretty new. I know, but like they're pretty new to arts and media funders. And then on the kind of commercial side, you have what's called CMF, the Canada Media Fund, or Telefilm in Quebec, or French Canada. And then you also in Ontario have Ontario Creates. And these are basically like federal and provincial funding bodies that are supposed to be basically supporting a growing video game industry. And it's like rough navigating it. One of the things I think I cried to Sade about a lot was just that you have to go through a fairly rigorous application process. And I'm also on a lot of advocacy councils because these streams of funding for video games, or what they call interactive digital media, don't have anything for sort of like marginalized communities, and they certainly don't have anything for Indigenous. So there's no Indigenous stream. There's no like for film and books and television in Canada, yes, there are Indigenous streams, and you can go for funding that way, and then you get an all Indigenous jury, and you're also, I think your requirements are kind of dropped, and there's an understanding that you're not going to have the same kind of resources that sort of like a non-Indigenous filmmaker or media maker would have. Don't have that in games. So we went for a brand new track called commercialization. Before that, there was other ones you could go for. This one was the most forgiving I've ever applied to, because they're just like, do you think it will make money? And I was like, yes. They're like, great. Just apply. I was like, okay, cool. Whereas the other ones were like, tell us what makes it innovative. Tell us why it's experimental. What about yours is unlike anything? And I was like, well, you have no games from Indigenous communities. You have no games made by anybody who's Indigenous. Anything that you do have that's Indigenous content is made by a non-Indigenous company, and they're all 100% educational. So you don't have anything that I would identify as like entertainment media. It's all educational media. And literally the response we got back was, that's not good enough. That doesn't make it experimental. That doesn't make it innovative. Tell us how you're going to make it metaverse VR. And you're just like, die inside every time. So yeah, then when we finally got to the experimental stream, and actually, so Ontario Creates has always had our back. They have always been like really excited to fund us. The difficulty we were running into is you're required to have 10% cash in the bank for your total budget. And the average video game costs about $500,000 a year if you're working with a regular team. So that's like a fully staffed, everybody getting paid close to living wage. No, I think actually when I did the first calculations, I was like, it's going to be more than 500,000. So you also are limited to only working for 2 years production with these systems or these funding bodies. So that's about $1 million. I do not have $100,000 in the bank as a 10% cash, and nobody was interested in kind of investing at that level. So we had to kind of like, I think we halved our budget, and then I think we had to like half it again in order to kind of just like we did a Kickstarter that wasn't super successful. Like it was successful, but like we only made $12,000 US. That like is not enough. I put personal money in. I kind of like worked on a bunch of contracts and stuff to put money into that through the business. And then when we kind of like had enough, then we applied. But again, that was with like a much reduced budget already. So we were already applying for way less than we should have been. And definitely, I think we did suffer for that. But it was either that or nothing at all. So I kind of was like, roll the dice and let's see how this goes. Maybe I'll make it. Maybe I'll have a breakdown. We'll see.
Why not both?
So that's kind of like how, why not both? We did that at the same time. I'm ambidextrous. So that's kind of how we that's who funded it, and that's kind of how we did it. I think in terms of, I haven't actually seen the final amount of how much we've actually spent. I'm a little afraid to. I know it was not enough because I wasn't paying myself for large chunks of that. And like Sade's not getting paid what he's worth, and like nobody got paid what they were worth.
Yeah.
We were just kind of like, anytime I got extra money, so we were really lucky. We got a couple of scholarships, and we won like the Ubisoft Indie Series, which came with a cash prize. That basically all went to Sade and then a few other people, like our dev team, in order to like make it functional. So it was very like bootstrappy. I would say this game was kind of like on the level of when people were like, oh, they did an indie film for only like 500,000, and you're like, that sounds like a lot of money. You're like, that's nothing. Like, it was gone in a week kind of idea. That's definitely how this went. Games are very expensive because people are expensive, because we live in a post or end of days capitalist hellscape.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, my Monkey Man was like, "Sounds like independent film budget problems." Yes, as
Oh
an
yeah, no.
as a
Crazy.
filmmaker, I literally did a 10-minute documentary one time, or a 10-minute pilot web series, and I think I got like 10,000 or something, and people are like, "Oh my god, that's so much money." I'm like, "It's really not. I didn't pay everyone. I paid everyone but myself." I'm like, it's not a lot of money. it
Yeah.
when you factor in paying all the people you need to pay, like your budget is usually the one to go first, because you're like, can I get by without it? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
Also asking a lot of people, can they wait? Sorry, go on, Sadie.
well, and like the thing in the States, it's even worse. Like trying to get funding for indie games, because it's literally, there exists no organizations like CMF or the Arts Council in the U.S.
Yeah.
So here it's, you have to go to, anymore it's like venture capitalists who are going to want a piece or all of your business.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it now in the indie space, where a lot of like game devs will make a game, put it out, and then it might hit, it might be successful, and then the funder now owns the property, and the original people working on it essentially are like, they can't do anything with it, they can't work on anything with it, they can't, there's no sequels because they're just sitting on the IP, and and there's no funding to get it done anyway. So it's just like, the indie scene, especially in the US, is particularly fraught.
Also, like, that's not even taking into consideration things like, we also have a required spend on marketing, which technically we were supposed to take out of that budget, but I was like, that's not happening. So now we have to find new money in order to like meet that requirement. If we don't meet that requirement, that could jeopardize whether or not we get additional funding for a new project in the future. Also with like CMF, like, it's not a grant. Like, they expect 15% recoup for 7 years on profit. That's on top of like, Steam taking 30%. So 45% of our profit is going into other people's pockets.
Yeah.
And so like, and this is a conversation I also try to have in like Indigenous art spaces, that, I don't know, just feels like it's not quite clicking, because I think there's still this like presumption that video games are software and software is always profitable. And that there's never any reason why you would not need to treat them as if they're profitable. So we don't really get treated as artists. We don't actually get the same level of respect as filmmakers, because it's like, well, you're making software, or just make Crash Bandicoot. And I was like, yeah, we'll just pop that out. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you see how people actually worked on Crash Bandicoot.
For sure. Oh, another question we have is, are you going to have any tables at any game conventions this year?
We already had 2. We had one in the States at IndieCade, and then we had one in Canada at XP Summit, which is like the new Canadian game industry event. I think we're gonna try for IndieCade. We're gonna try for Game Devs of Color. I think Girl Geek Con was already passed. I think that's this weekend. We're actually gonna try to go to Gamescom if we can. That one takes place in Germany, but that's like the new, I guess, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with like the Game Developers Conference or GDC that happens in like San Francisco. Gamescom is kind of like the Europe version of that, and quite a few publishers from around the world that don't go to GDC go to that one. So that would be cool to be able to go to that. I do know the Trade Commissioner's Office in Canada is excited to like put our game on market elsewhere. But again, it's like, also, we're really new to this and we don't have anybody who already knows how to do this, so we're kind of like navigating slightly blind. We are hopefully going to be partnering with an organization in Manitoba that's similar to Ontario Creates called New Media Manitoba, as part of an incubator program that they're going to kind of help us figure out, like, how do we connect to sort of like an international buyer's market that's not Steam, but also like how do we connect with an Indigenous market, because like this is very much like a game made for Indigenous people, but nobody has any data about like how do you specifically reach Indigenous game players. And we did try to work with a couple of PR companies, and literally every time they were just like, we give up, we've tried literally nothing, and we give up, and you're just like, thanks guys.
Well, I know for the 4 Directions we were in talks about doing something, and I found it a little confusing because I wasn't too sure if it was on Twitch, because most of us are streamers on Twitch, or if we were going to be streaming on the Steam page doing something.
Steam streams.
Yeah, and I was a little confused about it, but originally we were going to be doing it on the day of the release, and then we just got told that there was a lot of happening in your community, in your team. There was something that happened, so that we had to cancel it. And so I think we're still moving ahead with that, with the plans. I know it's something we're still interested in doing that, because I know, because we have a lot of people in our team who are actual like, I guess novice like voice actors, and are like trying to get into voice acting. So they wanted to so we were actually going to assign everyone a character, and then they would voice the character in it, and then we would stream it. So it was going to be really cool. I'm really excited about it. I can't wait for that to happen.
Yes.
But yeah, like things like that. Like I know, like for us, like even with the stream team, that's one of the things that we're trying to do is, like I said, where are these Indigenous storytellers, and how do we support them and make sure things move forward? So it is kind of hard, because even with us, when we were doing streaming, I know when I started streaming, I was like, where are the Indigenous people on this platform? And actually, I think that's how I even discovered the Indigenous game devs, because I knew someone that I met through, and they were like, oh, do you go here? It's like, they're like, join this Discord. So I'm like, okay. So I did, and they're like, so I was just like there for a while, but it was more for, I guess, game devs and game developers. Like, I am a writer, I'm a filmmaker, but like, I was like, I don't know what to do here. So I kind of mostly just looked around in the Indigenous game dev group, and I really appreciated how like it was specifically for Indigenous people, because I know we've had a couple people kind of come in there and be like, I'm an ally, and it's like, that's not what this was created for.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that was that was actually because of experiences that I and Beth had in other spaces that I was younger, so I wasn't curating or anything, but like, yeah, we were getting a lot of spaces that we were trying to build for ourselves that were just being filled up with allies, and they were taking up all the oxygen in the room, and there was never any intention to help either. Maybe that's me being like salty child, but also like it really did feel like, I'm working on this project, I need an Indigenous person in order to make it legit, and I was like, I'm like young, so I don't want to be rude, but also like this feels sus to me. And then as we were talking with other Indigenous devs at events and stuff, at imagineNATIVE and whatnot, they all talked about the exact same problem, and I was like, look, like, I think it's ridiculous if we feel pressured to let allies be in a space. That to me says there's a problem. You should not feel pressured. So why don't we just like come out and say it? We're just going to make a space for ourselves. And I think that it's really interesting because like definitely it's a quiet server, I would say, but it's a very like calm space, and people feel very, at least I've been told, people feel safe talking about things there. People feel safe sharing things. People feel safe, asking for help and like sharing slightly more personal things, like in our wellness section or a well-being session, which I think is like important, because we are kind of like that first generation, and having a space for ourselves where we can like be proud of each other and share things without worry of somebody like, oh, I'm gonna put this in my dissertation, without like talking to you about it, because there was a lot of extraction happening on an academic, like from academic spaces of like Indigenous media, and that included video games. And in fact, it felt like the only ones who paid attention were academics, which I have feelings about. But like Sadek can talk about like when we were at GDC online and we tried to do a roundtable. You remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah. That one was that was different. It was very much one of those an online roundtable, but also like you couldn't really see anyone, and like just interacting through chat is very. It's a little strange in a roundtable situation. You know, especially since like, you know, most times if you're like in person, you'll be able to see someone or hear them ask a question, but it was just more sort of like in the end, I think it was just we ended up just more talking, and then occasionally someone would pop in with a question, but not even that much really.
Yeah, well, because like we kind of, it was supposed to be for like Indigenous devs, and then once it filled up, I think there was like 30 people. We're like, oh wow, that's a good turnout. We're like, everybody introduce yourself, and it was like one Indigenous person that was like not us. So yeah, it did become this thing more of a lecture, which was like its own thing. And yeah, so like that's, and I've had experiences at GDC where it's like we try to make space for Indigenous creatives, and again it gets like filled up with people who want Indigenous creatives to work on their projects, and it's like we're just never given space. And I think one of the things that makes it a little bit fraught is, you know, people feel very comfortable waiting until you directly ask them, are you Indigenous? Even though you've probably made it, I felt like you've made it pretty clear that like this is a space for Indigenous devs. Like I don't feel like, you know, Black devs have to deal with that, where somebody comes in and sits and waits and like is just willing to pretend until you ask them a direct question. And I was like, I've always found that very frustrating about trying to build community for Indigenous game devs. And I know like it's not an uncommon stress point, and it feels so disrespectful that people who call themselves allies are constantly like just sitting and waiting to extract, it feels like. And it's like, yeah, so it's been one of the things where I think it's been a struggle, because you don't want to have say somebody like, oh, you can't be in here because you don't meet my definition of Indigenous. So we're very careful with the Indigenous game devs that it is global. If you identify as Indigenous, that's good enough for us. If at any point the community you say you're a part of says that no, you're not, that is grounds for expulsion. But that we leave it up to the community to decide and to talk to us. We do not engage in that kind of like, I don't know what to call it, like that type of particular like gatekeeping. Like I don't. It's just like, because I'm like, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to like not have the right connection and not be considered. You know, Métis is a fraught space, so I'm also like very aware of how, you know, how am I kind of adding to the problems? How can I be part of the solution? It's hard. Also, we're all young. We have like no older people here. It's very hard to like know if you're doing the right thing.
It's like somehow we became the old people and no one.
I'm a child.
Yeah.
I cannot make these decisions.
I'm gonna need a more adultier adult, please.
Yeah, can I get an older adult?
Yeah.
Plus, you know, like for me, you know, I started game dev in Seattle, of all places, and Seattle actually has a fairly large Indigenous population. But even so, I worked in an industry that was predominantly young white dudes, and like very few people of color.
Yeah.
And you know, especially it was, I think, started 2006, 2007. You know, especially that at that time, you know, I would go to industry dev nights, and I'd be like the only Indigenous person there, and it's just sort of like it was a very isolating experience, you know. And there may have been other Indigenous devs in the industry, but they weren't showing up that dev night. And they also, if they were there, they were not, you know, really. There was no place to like say, "Hey, I'm an Indigenous person living, working in Seattle in video games. Want to chill?" You know, there didn't exist that. So it was very, you know, very lonely for a long time. And that's one of the reasons I like Indigenous game devs so much. Is it's like, hey, there's way more of us, and it's like, and it's not just Indigenous to like North America. We, you know, it's global Indigenous, which is really awesome.
Got so many mob from Australia, and we got lots of Maori. Got some Sami. We've had some more people, some Indigenous from Vietnam, Indigenous from India and Pakistan, Malaysia. I think we got one Indigenous person from there. So like, yeah, it's also. But it is like overly dominated by North American Indigenous, and one of the conversations we've kind of had is like, in Australia and New Zealand, they kind of also have their own groups, and probably one day that's gonna like probably happen to Indigenous game devs, where we're gonna have like an Indigenous game dev group that is specific to the Americas, and then probably then needs to also be stratified a little between, you know, there are huge differences once you kind of like hit the Mississippi down, because that's just, and or the meridian up. So it's like there are cultural differences once you shift in the land, and I think that's something that as we grow as in the industry, we're gonna want to spend more time with people who are kind of culturally closer to us as Indigenous people, and talk in those spaces, because that is healthy to share those things and to like help each other, especially because then that's how you grow in your area. And that's something I'm looking forward to one day. But yeah, it's really dominated by North American Indigenous, mostly Haud and Anishinaabe.
Another question we had, I'm not sure I'm in transit. Have you guys touched on AI art generation to make games and code games? No, I don't believe we talked about that at all. I mean, I don't know. I don't know too much about it. I know the AI art is a huge thing that kind of happens now. I mean,
Let me make my face.
Your face goes real squinty. Like.
Yeah. I personally find AI art in its current form to be a completely extractive manipulation of the work of millions, if not, you know, hundreds of millions of artists, and purely for the exploitation of a few software companies and their devs to steal content from the internet under the guise of research, and then turn that into a profitable market that they have people paying ridiculous subscriptions for stuff they never owned and are capitalizing on. I hate it. It makes some cool stuff. It also makes some really messed up stuff. Also, so many of these different AI databases are rampant with massive implicit like white supremacist biases, and I don't want that shit anywhere near like the product that I work on. So I have very strong feelings about it. Yeah, people can, you know, cut corners and, you know, use it to do whatever, but I think you are just, you know, taking advantage and exploiting you know, millions and millions of people, and then giving your money to a bunch of essentially like people who don't care and are looking for any new scam to make some money. So like, you can't copyright AI art right now in the US anyway, so it's like, it's pointless. If we were to use AI art in a game, we could not copyright it and not protect our IP, which in the US, that is how you make a business. That is how you know, survive and thrive, is like you snap up IPs and you wring the life out of them. which is terrible. That's awful. But it's the only way you survive in the capitalist hellscape we exist in. And so, like, if we were to make an AI version of Hill Agency, anyone could be able to take that and then do whatever they want with it. Like, sure, they could now too, but the legal avenues to protect your artwork don't exist for AI art as it currently stands. And it's super gross, man. Like, I don't know. I don't like.
It's also like a lot of the stuff that we do want, that a lot of companies who, I guess not the ones that I think we're currently talking about, but there was a lot of work that was being done using machine learning for helping animators with tweening, helping people who don't have steady hands, whether that is, a disability or just like you just struggle, because like I struggle with my straight lines. But like there was machine learning that was being developed for that kind of stuff, but it's not sexy. And so it gets ignored, and a lot of it like gets dropped. But like there are a lot of things that we use as I guess like augmenting tools in our software that technically falls under that kind of like machine learning AI, but in terms of like just straight up as people mean it, like you are using like OpenOcean or whatever the other one is, are you using chat GPT? I'm like, no, we don't use those things. But also like we enjoy making these things. Like these are not the parts of our job that we find cumbersome. And in fact, the parts of our job that are cumbersome is the stuff that you can't have AI do. It's the monotonous testing. It's the putting things in. It's the like, I'm going to turn this chair just like that so I get it where I want it. That's the part of the job that's tedious, but you can't teach a machine to do that. Because in that case, you're just kind of like handing everything over. And at that point, it's like, are you making, or are you just like playing around because you have something that you want for yourself, that you want to exist in the world, and you don't have the funds available to make it, and you're just trying to make a proof of concept? Like those things, as long as you're not making money off of it, and you're being upfront about where you got everything from, I think I'm a little bit more forgiving than Sade about it. But I mean, I think I've been asked this question a lot. I've also been asked a lot, like, oh, if I use any like AI for doing the lore. And my response is, why would I give a machine the job I enjoy? And I think sometimes though, when I do talk to people about that, there is they get upset or they're resistant to the idea that I might enjoy doing that, because they do not enjoy doing that. And sometimes when they start talking, I just like, I think you're burnt out. Like, I think people don't really acknowledge that sometimes the reason they don't want to do creative things, but really have this drive to do these creative things, is not because you don't want to do it or you don't want to do the work. You're burnt out. We live in a really stressful environment all the time. If you have a drive to make something but are exhausted at the concept of doing it, the problem isn't the labor of making it. The problem is whatever is making you exhausted. And I think we don't get curious enough about where is that coming from. Because we're very, I think as a race, we're one of those creatures that like, oh, it's in front of me. The thing in front of me must be hurting me. The fact that I can't make this video game is hurting me. And I was like, I think it might be because you just worked an 80-hour work week and you've only gotten like 4 hours of sleep a night. I think that might be the problem. And you're like, no, it's definitely the fact that I can't make this video game easily.
Yeah. Like you said, it is people taking, they're designing these AIs to take the fun part away. Because it's not about, creating for them. It's about removing an obstacle, or what they perceive as an obstacle, which is the creative person. Essentially, if you have the chat GPT write your story, I don't have to hire you as a writer. I can just have this machine do it, and then I've just saved a bunch of money as a capitalist, and I don't give a damn what you do as a human being, because you're not my problem anymore. I don't have to pay your insurance. I don't have to pay for your kids. I don't have to pay your food. I don't have to pay any of that stuff. It's literally, all this AI stuff is just to make capitalists more money. It's not to help you at all. It's to remove people from the equation.
And what they keep forgetting is that what computers can't do is, and Kelly Turnbull, who's like an excellent comic artist online, did a whole thread on this. It's like, a machine will never be able to do, what did she call it? The mundane perversion of a normal human. So like her example was her Giovanni and rock gym coach / comic fic, which delves into the deeper relationship of why would a man want to conquer the world while finding love in the arms of a rock gym coach. And I was like, a machine could not come up with that because it's too mundane of a perversion. And that's what's beautiful about human creation. It's just like the fact that you're like, that's weird, but also now my kink, apparently.
Well, and I think, yeah, I totally agree. And I know, like, even when that fad was kind of like around where everyone was using the AI art to upload a picture and it did the thing, like, I was like, I don't know why, but just something about this bothers me. Because I know an AI doesn't have the creativity, so that means that they scoured the earth, what was online, and probably stole someone's images and then just immersed you in it. So in a sense, taking someone else's art and created art from it, and people are like, oh, it's so beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, but who is the original artist? Like, who, like, where's even the acknowledgement that this art was created or inspired by or taken from this artist? There was nothing in there saying, oh, it was from this art piece that we created this from, or these many art pieces that we created this from. And maybe it's because I'm an artist myself and I work in arts, I work with artists. You know, we always talk about crediting people no matter what, like credit so much so you over credit, you know?
Oh yeah, no, I think the other thing is that people don't, and this isn't even a conspiracy theory, it's in the terms of use. They are using your photos to train facial recognition software, which is sold to the police and to the military, and they're not open about this, but it doesn't take a lot of digging to find out that's they have contracts, they have military contracts, or the company that they sell their information to, or the company that's even the base code for the little fun AR app that you're using. Like, I don't use those ones where like show a picture of you when you were 12 and show a picture of you now. That's for facial recognition software to be able to identify. And like sometimes the ones that I think people are a little bit more wary of are the ones that ask you like, where do you live? What is your nationality? Or what do you identify as your race? And like that's what that's for. So like I'm always like so sus. At the same time, like I also recognize that like they are very pretty. And it's easy to get caught up in it and not think of the human cost behind it, because it is pretty, and sometimes you just want to look like native Leia in 10 seconds.
So I can draw native Leia, so I'm good.
Yeah, you don't have that problem.
Yeah, I worked a long time to be able to do that. But it's like, you know, that's also another part. Some people don't want to put in the effort that it takes to do stuff. And, you know, some people, you know, will hit the wall and just not be able to do what they want to do. And yeah, that sucks. But then you could also hire an artist. And yes, we're expensive. But, you know, you'll get something created by a person who actually cares, as opposed to a machine that just spits out, you know, recombined pixel data from billions of images from the internet. That's all it is. It's just recombined pixel data.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, it's the algorithm says, all right, these pixels go by these pixels with this much accuracy at that much time. Let's just smash them all together. That's it, man. It's just a blender.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people who maybe don't want to make games but want to make money off of games are usually kind of because I feel like we've moved into an era where like, oh, data is gonna save us, data will tell us exactly what we should make. It doesn't. You never know what the next big thing is going to be, and it's so situational, and it's so subjective, and you might as well just grab a bunch of projects you like, throw them in a hat, and just pick out 3. You'd probably have a better history of success if you did that. I remember talking to somebody like, yeah, we need to go back to the cigar chomping days of like the golden age of theater. But like, well, the kids like it, just make it. But like, everybody wants a sure thing right now, and you're like, that's not how media works, ever.
There was I can't remember what the name of the game was, but on Xbox just recently, there was a little indie game that like stealth released at the same time as like a big name game, and the big name game flopped, and the little indie game was just like, oh my god, people love it, and it was like huge all of a sudden. And because my brain is a squirrel, it can't hang on to these things, and it was just like, and I don't think it wasn't the knockout one, but I can't remember what it was called. But yeah, it was just one of those things like no one expected it to hit. It was a stealth release. No one, it was just like, so, no marketing, no nothing, and then all of a sudden it was huge. It's like Fortnite. People kind of didn't expect Fortnite to hit the way it did.
Yes.
Epic was.
Yeah, and Fortnite was an experiment.
Yeah.
That was just an experiment.
Yeah. They were just like, we're just thinking around, we're gonna try something cool. It's like, and it blew up.
Well, because they were trying to shift away from their oh my god, the Unreal tournament, which had never really worked for them the way I think other, like that Team Fortress had blown up around the same time that Unreal Tournament came out, and just Unreal Tournament could not catch fire. And then they were trying to make a big fantasy epic, and they just kind of like dropped it, and then all of a sudden like basically used what they had left to make Fortnite. And then, but I think that blew up not because Fortnite was like, destined to be a successful game. It just hit the right market at the right time.
Yeah, because
which is why it's like, we don't know how ours will do. It could just be like a meh, and then we do something else, and then it blows up.
So, I mean,
3 years of meh.
So yeah, how long, like from the time that you started to now in release, like how long have you actually been working on the project?
I've been working on this thing since 2017. I'd like to stop, please. And I'm probably going to be working on it for another year.
Yeah, the first stuff I did was like at the end of 2019. So, like it was like the very first thing I did, and then it was kind of a while that I didn't do anything, and then Meagan was just like, "Hey, you want to do some more stuff?" Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, well, and also like games have a long tail. I don't know how it is for film, but like with games, if you tell your funder we're gonna make this amount of money total in the lifetime, that usually you think you're gonna make that in 5 years, and that's one of the risks of getting into games, is without a strong sort of backing to get you through to your next game, most studios flop after 5 years, because usually it takes about 3 properties before you start seeing enough income that you can kind of stay afloat comfortably. Not everybody blows up, but there are lots of companies that have just like made it by staying super, super, super lean until they kind of hit that point where they're like, okay, we're making enough money, we can hire another person. Usually expanding too fast is what's going to kill you, even if you have income, like if you have capital or if you have like investments. That stuff can kind of cause real long-term problems if you just like go all in. But when you get investments, sometimes they're expecting that you will go all in, but they could leave. So yeah, it's a tough space to navigate. I figure for film, it's like you're going from project to project as well.
Yeah, I mean, film's a little. You have so once you finish it, right? You actually have a 2-year window to put it into film festivals. So that's what you don't put it online. You don't really do anything, and you can't really sell it or do anything. So it's pretty strict, and it really depends on what's important to you as well. Like a lot of film festivals want like what do you call it? A premier status. So they're like, we want premier status, we want Canada premier, we want North America, we want international. And so then it also depends on which film festivals you put it into. So some film festivals, I've had films put in our film festival that they're like, so there's a film festival that wants premier status and we kind of want to do that too. And we're like, well, how about this? Pull it out of our film festival this year and you can just come back next year. Like we're pretty open to that. So that's one of the things, like, because we understand the system. But yeah, it usually has like a 2-year kind of like promotion kind of thing, and then it really depends on what you do with it afterwards. But yeah, it usually, if it's not really known, unless it's like something someone watches later on and it just kind of takes off, then it might. But
yeah, like, so for us, we have to publish it. That's a requirement of getting the last bit of our funding.
Mm-hmm.
So they actually, our funders hold back 15% until after launch and after our final report, and in one case until after our final audit, because we have to be audited, because they still exist in an era where they think that 500,000 is a lot of money, which is like, it's not. And they didn't even give us 500,000. It's like the project itself was over 500,000. And you're like, that's pocket change for something of this size. But so we do run into issues with non-game festivals that want video games, because they will say, have you, are you publicly available, blah, blah, blah. And I have had to email and be like, do you understand that that's not a thing that game makers can do? Like, we cannot give you premier status because and it's the same thing with, like, if you have a publisher is not going to be okay with you waiting, because festivals are for clout, they're not for market. Steam is market, PlayStation is market, Xbox is market. They will not let you wait. So one of the things I think we've also been seeing is, like, film festivals want to expand, but they also don't have anybody on staff who understands the industry, and so they just assume it must be the same, right? While also treating us like software. We can't win. It's like, it's always the worst of everything.
I know. That's why one of the things like happened during the pandemic was, because I was so like, I was kind of immersed in this world, I just learned so much. So half the time I'm in my meetings going, no, this is what we're gonna do. They're like, no, you don't do that. We don't do that there. No. And so I'm constantly kind of like educating even my own like coworkers about like the gaming space and streaming and how things work, and also learning myself a lot of the times, because I know it's different, and I know you can't apply the same things that you would for that to this. So yeah, having that person with that knowledge on your team is very helpful.
Yes, more festivals need to go get that person.
Yes. And it's funny, it just happens to be I'm that person for our film festival, but it's like, so sometimes other film festivals will kind of have conversations about it too and stuff, and I'll just kind of like share what I kind of know and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely an evolving industry, and especially because as Indigenous people, we're already excluded from media, from stories, and we're seeing that change. And it's really because we are carving the space out for ourselves and saying, we're here too, and taking up our space, rightfully so.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I think was really cool about our game coming out when it is because we've just had a couple big shows break through, like on TV, Indigenous shows with like Reservation Dogs and Rutherford Falls, even though they got canceled. Those two shows were, they're pretty big, and they did a good job of like sort of making people aware. It's like, oh yeah, that's right, Indigenous people exist, and for us in the game industry, there's not really another studio, doing what we're doing, telling our own stories. Most people, when they think of Indigenous games, they think of something very stereotypical, or I hate to kind of bash on Never Alone, but Never Alone is a story that's it's made by non-Indigenous people. It's like it's based on Indigenous stories, but it's not Indigenous people who made the game. It's another sort of extractive project.
Well,
So
and
it's like,
that's the one that's like, because I played Never Alone, and I've talked to people about it, and I did a lot of research into it as well too. And they worked with the community, and it's like that's I mean, same thing with the film industry. People always tell you, they're like, if you want to be taken seriously, you should work with someone non-Indigenous, because for some reason they have the thing that they're like, they're more trustworthy than you are. And it's like, no, they're where they are because one day someone decided to take a chance on them and let them to get where they are. What we need is for you to stop telling us to work with non-Indigenous people and just take a chance on us so that we can get there too.
Get out of our way.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons I think Reservation Dogs works so well is, Taika Waititi got enough clout on his own as an Indigenous Maori person and was able to say, hey, I'm going to go fund all these different Indigenous projects all over the place. Not just in the US, but like all over.
Yeah.
And, that, he had proven himself and had been able to essentially secure funding to say, like, hey, my name's attached to this. We're just going to make this thing. And, that's kind of how, like, a lot of his projects were started, was just like, we're just going to make this thing and get out of our way. So,
well, I think for the one thing I've noticed is, like, you're not allowed to make a bad product. Like, that feels like what was, like, especially with Never Alone, what felt like it was going on was, like, I've seen it from, like, the events I've done, or from sort of, like, the game camps I've done with Indigenous kids, where it's like there's this immense pressure to have something super high quality polished out, where it's like, that's not how it worked for the game companies that are big now. If you actually go back and look at their history, they always start out with, like, a handful of games that don't do well, that are janky, or just don't quite connect with people. But they were given support, and they had people who were kind of backing them up, and they were allowed to keep continuing until they found something that worked. And it's like, Indigenous communities don't get that, or Indigenous game devs don't get that. And I know it's a struggle for filmmakers too. Like, I have heard from when I was working at imagineNATIVE, so many film matriarchs just lamenting the labor they had to do, and the lack of support that they were getting from their own communities, or the lack of support they were getting from any kind of financial backing. And that pressure to work with a non-Indigenous company, and really what they're saying is, this company has the money already. It's not just about clout, it's about, like, they already have all the resources. Just give them your money so that they can keep up their polish, and then you'll get something that looks nice and polished. But oh, by the way, they get to now take your product to market to support their own company, or they get to use it as a way of extracting even more money from Indigenous communities to make other projects. And it is very frustrating to not be given the benefit of the doubt, to hear mostly concerns and no trust. That you're like, yeah, let's just, like, make this. Like, yeah, it's fine if it's bad. Like, there's very much a don't screw up or else vibe. That's like, yeah, we'll help you, but you better not screw. And you're like, I don't need that pressure. I don't need that. I deal enough with that in my own life. I don't need the added of, like, if I fail, that's it. You don't get any more chances. You're like, how's that community even? Like, what about that is nurturing of a generation that's trying something different, that's trying to find space and to speak, their stories and their truth? Like, that, how is that anything other than just perpetuating more colonization on your young people?
Yeah. So, how many more times can we essentially just make another? It's like, oh, we're just going to do another language program, do a language app. It's like, all right, cool. How many have you made already? 12? Oh, all right. It's like, that's not going to hit. It's like, you need something that's going to, catch younger people, get them interested. And, gaming is a huge industry. And there's a lot of opportunity for Indigenous communities to get together and like really build capacity, because there are people out here who are willing to teach people how to do stuff, how to make games, and all we need is the opportunity to, you know, bring our people into it. Because imagine the games that'll come after this one if communities are given the opportunity to take the chance and to fail. Because, you know, like I said, you only get something good after you failed a few times.
Yeah, like we've already had. I mean, I don't want to give too much credence to people being rude to us, but like, you know, we have had people be like, "Oh, like this is what you came up with," and I was like, "Do you know how much fighting I had to do to get what I got in here?" Like, I just like imagine telling the person at the front of the canoe, "Oh, you know what? I feel like you could have like broken those branches a little bit more cleanly for me." You're like, "You could stand up here if you'd like. I'll sit in the back." Like, yeah, it's frustrating when you're at the front because you can see how that next generation is just going to fly past you, and like in a way that's okay, because that means then I get video games that are better quality that I can play, that I didn't have to stare at for 5 years straight.
Yeah, that's definitely.
Please come.
Well, and it is anytime you're making art or like doing something for the first time is, yeah, definitely very hard. And I hear what you're saying about like making games that aren't really, you know, polished right off the bat and is like just perfect, because there's two games that I started playing this year and last year, and they're backed by big organizations. One of them is Disney Dreamlight Valley, which actually is technically not a full game yet. I have early access. So if you paid for its early access, it's supposed to go free to play. It was supposed to go free to play in the springtime, so sometime like in like March. That's when they told us it's still not free to play. I've actually bought it twice now. It's so broken. There's so many things. Because I brought it on my Switch and I bought it on my computer so I can go back and forth.
Oh damn.
And because it didn't save right on my Switch, it actually, like, because there's a cloud storage, it ended up overwriting my PC version, so I ended up having to do things over. And there were so many like broken hacks that I found just from the online community of like, I didn't have to wait for that because I figured out I could move my well over there, so I didn't have to wait to clear the branches, and then I just transport to my well. So it was all those things of like all those games, and oh my god, I had my friend who also streams played it, and one of the characters kept getting stuck, but they needed them to go down to talk to someone, and they just kept getting stuck. Yes. So they ended up building bushes, like almost like a little labyrinth for them to like follow this path to get to where they needed to go. But it was so broken. And it's like, this is Disney. Disney makes this game. Disney is not hurting for money at all. But no one said to them, is this a good product to go? And it's like, no, it's literally early access. And then the other one is I've been playing a lot of a game called New World, which is by Amazon Gaming. Again, Amazon. It's a huge open world MMO kind of game, and it's broken all the time. And like not even just broken, but like the servers. Like if you go into a town that's like the new kind of like area, like you're glitching all over the place because there's so many people there. So I'm like, you can't wait to leave because your game will finally start playing. But it's a huge game. It glitches all the time. You can even see the little patches of the like development, because like if you're walking, like if the game's not loading properly, and then sometimes you'll walk past someone and all you see is a floating head. And again, that game has like so much money invested into it, and so yeah, it literally is. Sometimes you just need those people to just take a chance on you, have it work. I was at Indigenous film pitch at this big festival in Banff called Banff World Media Festival, and I was actually a little bit shocked that there were some new like emerging kind of filmmakers that were pitching to like networks and stuff like that, but then there were people that I was like, they pitching? If I had to say that they, who is emerging and who's kind of established, they are the people that are established that, that my generation looks up to because of all the cool work that we know they've done. And I'm like, why are they pitching? Or like, I think
they're also pitching in IDM too,
and it's
which
like
that's a
right. And that's I'm so confused about that because I was like, was I thinking that they were way far ahead than I thought they were? But technically, because they're still Indigenous, we're in this Indigenous world where no one wants to take a chance on us, and they want us to partner with those non-Indigenous companies. They want us to, they're willing to take a partner. They're willing to take a chance on another organization, but not us. And it's like, I never get it, and it's very frustrating.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can't speak to like anyone in specifics or whatnot, but one thing I have noticed from conversations I have had with, like, I have seen the exact same thing you're talking about. There is a point where people forget that they're not struggling anymore, but they're still in hustle mode. And they don't take stock of what they have, and they don't take stock of their resources, and they always feel like they're unresourced.
Yeah.
So they continually kind of keep going for these things that you're like, you should be able to say no to this, or they should be talking to you. But there also there are those who just like, no, they don't have anybody in their corner. They were never able to get that kind of backing. And I think again it comes back to like, our community should be funding us, and they shouldn't necessarily be funding us in the way that like investors or publishers fund us. They should just be like, here's your housing, here's your food, but also in the same way of like, hey, in the morning you're expected to come and like do these community things, and then you have the whole afternoon to you. Like, I love listening to my friend Silver Spook, Chris, talk about their Indigenous Hawaiian anarchist commune farm on the Big Island in Hawaii, and like that's literally their day. They've got a family, they've got friends that live there who also have their own families, they've got a rooster that will never shut up, but they like, they get up in the morning. That's just roosters, chickens, man. But they get up in the morning and they do the chores that need to be done around. They take care of the fields, they take care of the house, and then like all afternoon is spent on video games. And I'm like, that's kind of the future that I would like to see, because like if you're a filmmaker who is kind of guaranteed space and resources and that safety net, you don't need a ton of money. One of the things that like Sade and I talk about all the time is like, if we lived in community together with our team, we could probably have done this for way less money than we actually needed to, because we wouldn't have these cost of living things, because that would be provided for by community. And I think there's sometimes a misunderstanding when I say community should be supporting this, in that like, oh, so we should be giving you our budget. I'm like, no. You should be building a space where I do the things I need to do to keep the community running, but I also have the majority of my time to work on these things with my friends and family that live in community with me. That might not be something that, to me, somebody who grew up disconnected and in an urban setting may ever have, but there's lots of people who like still live in community and still could have that experience if given, the space and resources. And I think it's part of a larger conversation that, we've been having as Indigenous people in North America about, what does sovereignty look like? What does land back look like? What does our future look like? And I think it's a conversation that we're starting to have in earnest. And I do see it as another way of kind of reclaiming our ways of living that aren't necessarily ever going to go back to exactly what it was, but could definitely be a lot healthier than they are. And I think we are more resourced than we think we are. I think that's the one thing that I'm starting to realize, that we've been told for so long, or we've had things held back from us for so long, especially communities that live in areas with deep resource extraction, that this is your lot and this is what you're gonna have to put up with, and no help is coming. But then I'm feeling very hopeful because I see communities in kind of the BC area who aren't getting help from the government, who are building for themselves a self-sustaining community that does not need, the settler state, does not need money, and can kind of provide for everybody. And we have the tools, and I think for the first time though, what we have that we didn't have before is the space, where the military is not showing up all the time. They're still showing up, like the RCMP is still showing up, and the police still show up, but it's not in the kind of way that it used to be. And it's, I think, coming back to that, like, how do you know when you're resourced? Like, I think it's a question we need to start asking ourselves too. It's like, how do you know when you're like, I've got enough. I don't need to go to that pitch meeting with Netflix because, like, I've got enough in my own space. I think it's a hard question to ask yourself sometimes because you're so used to being right on the edge of not having enough. And I feel that because that's where I feel like I am. But also I'm not. I'm in a weird space where I'm like, I am gonna be okay. But also, like, I don't know what next year's gonna hold.
So I mean, obviously this game is kind of like working and getting and going and kind of seeing where it goes. Do you have any other projects that you're working on currently that you're hoping to? Or can you tell me?
We can't talk about it.
Okay.
No.
But you are working on something.
Yeah. We have like 10 games in the backlog we want to make. And that's just the stuff that we came up with between when Sada and I first started hanging out. So yeah, like between now and the future, they're probably going to be, well, like, yeah, we want to make a lot of games. We want to make a lot of different games. We've got an idea for what we want to do in the future. But I think, having gone through such a rough ride the first time, I think we're a little cautious about talking about it just yet.
Well, I mean, it's definitely a long process, but I mean, it's really cool. Like I said, it's, I think that's why I was so interested in talking to both of you and talking about and playing the game was because I was looking for something that was similar to this. Because yeah, all I had was Never Alone. There was another game that was like, I haven't seen it yet, but I haven't played it yet, but it's basically a game for your mobile app, and if I had to describe it, it's almost like Oregon Trail, but for Indigenous. I think that's what I took away from it.
Is that when the rivers?
Yeah, something like that.
When rivers are trails?
Yeah. Yeah. But that was like a I think it's like a phone game. I think that was the only other one that I kind of saw, because yeah, most games are, like I said, usually made by non-Indigenous people that are like about Indigenous people. There was one game actually that was made by a company, I think in like, I don't know if it was the Ukraine or if it was Holland. It was something like that. Anyways, it was called it was like
This Land Is Your Land?
Yeah, This Land Is Your Land.
Yeah.
I was so mad. My brother showed it to me. He's like, "Do you want to play it?" I'm like, "No, I'm not giving those people my money." I was like, I was so mad. And I was like, well, who are they? Who did they work with? Who did they consult? I'm trying to see the silver lining. Nobody. And then it's like, nobody. They just thought they're going to create a pan-Indigenous person because they don't want to like attach it to any community. And I was like, yeah, that's actually our biggest problem. That's why people think that, we all wear headdresses or, because they're modeling everything after what they see in the movies, which is usually the Plains Indians, right? It's not, and we are very diverse amongst ourselves. We have different cultures, we have different languages. Like, we are diverse within ourselves. So it's like, it's not the same. Like, we're not the same. And so, it's very, it's frustrating all around.
Oh yeah, like I wrote a whole article about it called like "What Makes It Indigenous," and it was just I was just talking about that cycle and yeah, how it kind of affects Indigenous media. Yeah, it's frustrating. Meagan Games they should be announcing a project by the end of the year. So that's another Canadian Indigenous game company. They're doing something totally different.
Games?
Yeah.
Is that the one that's
is it just Meagan?
Yeah, it's Meagan, not there's two that have very similar names.
Yeah, because there's one here there's one in Edmonton. They have like a whole game board cafe, but they do, I think, game boards.
Yes. That's Pay
Meagan.
Yeah.
Different Meagan.
No, Meagan Games is like, I think they're in Alberta as well. They have done stuff with Pay Meagan, but no, they're a video game company. But they haven't announced anything yet, so they're earlier than we are. They should be announcing something at the end of the year, I think. I don't want to speak for anybody.
Yeah. It's like we've got to see a few little things in the Indigenous game dev Discord, so it's like we get to see little sneak teases. So it's just like it should be fun once they make their live announcement, because I'm looking forward to it myself.
I am too. It looks amazing.
Yeah.
So you can, you Anthea, you get to see if you want to go look around for them.
Yeah.
And
okay.
then
So I have to look. Yeah.
But yeah, no, we're really putting things together. We're hoping we'll actually, if we do get funding, we'll be able to make it announced in December. So
Yay!
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's good.
Also, if anybody wants to be a publisher or wants to be our biz dev, I think producer.
What we need is someone just to come up with a big money hat with no strings attached, and just be like, "Here's this ungodly wad of cash with no strings attached. Do what it is that you do." It's like, all right.
I mean, I will allow for that 15% cut. I will allow that.
Yeah.
As long as it's on the project. Don't want to be in the company.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing too, because we're a sole.
Yeah.
I'm the only owner, which is great because I'm allowed to have board meetings in my head and sign a piece of paper saying I had a board meeting. But as soon as I have a single partner, I have to have a board. And I was like, I don't want a board.
I know one of the things that I learned early on being a filmmaker was the little loopholes that you can get with organizations too. So my first project, we actually had a little partners that helped us with this project, and one of them was University of Alberta, Edmonton Arts Council, and Dreamspeakers, because at the time I worked for them, and because we're a nonprofit charity, we were able to access grants that were available only to nonprofit charities, and we did that as a partner, and they basically became like our fiscal agent. So we didn't collect any of the money. All the money went to the nonprofit, and then they charge like 15-20% like admin fee, which is, they have to do their books at the end of the night. And then we got the money and we paid everyone. I mean, I didn't pay myself because obviously didn't get a lot of money, but it was one of those things that like, oh, okay, I didn't know I could do that. So anytime I meet someone and they're like, yeah, we could apply for all these grants, but we have to be a nonprofit. We're thinking about starting a nonprofit. And I was like, no, partner with a nonprofit. And once you do that, then you can still get those grants on the behalf of that nonprofit.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to do that. That has also been a difficult thing to navigate, is like finding that nonprofit that you can work with that understands and trusts you to just do your job and isn't going to be all like, but yeah. I think that's something we're going to start finding in the next year. I don't actually know how this is going to go. I think probably it being so slow at first is, despite how like salty I am about not being an instant overnight success like anybody would be. Like I also am like kind of thankful, because it's like I don't know how I would handle it. I don't know how I would handle success, like actual success at this point, because it's so like we're just finding our feet. I think we've managed to find, like Sade and I found each other. I feel really good about the little team that we put together who finished the game with us. We've got a great partner in our dev team company because we don't have an internal dev. They left the project. And then we're kind of like also trying to build capacity and trying to find Indigenous talent is not as hard as it used to be, but finding Indigenous talent that's already trained is impossible. So it's a lot of interns, and I kind of include myself in that.
It's like my experience in game dev is really not typical either. So it's just like, talk about, the capacity finding people who like experienced is dang near impossible. I fell into it. Like, I didn't intentionally go to school for art school to go into video games. Like, I originally went for an animation studio. I wanted to learn how to do animation, and once I was at the school, I realized it's way too tedious, man. Like, I can't do this. My brain just won't let me. And that's, I realized, I had more well suited to being an illustrator or concept art. And a friend of mine actually he got hired at a small studio in Seattle, and he was just like, hey, they're looking for a concept guy. I'm like, dude, I don't even have a portfolio. And that's just it. And he's just like, come stay on my couch for like a month and we'll work on a portfolio. And then I still didn't. I had like 6 ratty sketchbooks when I went there. And the producer looked at my stuff, and I realized, I'm like, I gotta impress this guy somehow. So when he went upstairs, I drew his office, and then with a ballpoint pen, and then just threw it on his desk. And because like that was my shot. Like I wasn't prepped for anything else. Like I was just like, I gotta do whatever it is I can do to say that I can do this job, because as an Indigenous person, I didn't have the money to go to art school. I didn't have the money for the computers. iPads weren't a thing yet. It's just like I had 6 ratty sketchbooks that I had been drawing in for a number of years. And I'm just like, I got one shot and I gotta shoot it. And it was because of a ballpoint pen and 15 minutes while he was out of the room that I sketched his entire office and then threw it on his desk. And I'm just like, this is it, man. It's like, this will work or it won't.
Yeah.
And he came down, he saw that, and he's just like, did you just do this? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'll be right back. He went upstairs. Then I got to meet with the CEO, and they were just like, hey, talk to Guy. So I went and I talked to him, and he's just like, well, we're not really looking for anyone right now. So all right, cool. And I'm just like, well, I gotta leave. I'm gonna go work fire season, make some money so I can survive. And on the drive back to Eastern Washington, they called me, and they're just like, hey, we'll offer you the job. I'm like, cool, I'll be back in 3 months. And I dipped, and that was just it. I'm just like, I got to make some money to survive right now, and if y'all want to have me around, cool. And I was there I got to do some really cool projects while I was there. My experiences there were definitely tough, and it's didn't end the way I wanted it to, but it really helped me like kind of realize that even though I didn't have like the privilege of the tools and the outlets or the training, that I could do this, and if I can do it, anybody else can. So it's just like, it's like, and everyone's like, oh, you're such a great artist. I'm like I'm just persistent, man. That's it.
Oh yeah.
It's like I'm obnoxiously persistent at things I enjoy. Maybe that's ADHD. I don't know. But
maybe it's Maybelline.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the same thing. It's like someone took a shot on me.
Yeah.
And we just need more of that. And that's what we need. We need our own people who are in positions of power, in our own, tribal nations, governments, to be willing to say, hey, let's do this thing. Let's take a shot. Let's get some people trained in this stuff. Because, I'm not gonna lie, like there's so much stuff about game dev you can learn just on YouTube now. Like,
yeah.
it's not near as like oystered as it used to be. That's my big word for the night.
Yeah, like, I think the biggest boundaries right now are actually this kind of plague of perpetual online stuff or like constant updates. If we could have access to kind of like, I call it stableware, which is just like a version of a game engine that I will not get any updates for because I don't want updates because that messes up everything. And the same thing with like the plugins and the assets and stuff like that. Like, it is so much easier now to teach games, but what often is getting in the way of being able to teach games is just stable software that you don't have to worry about it updating and messing up all your hard work and needing to have a background in computer science in order to fix it. And another thing that, like, you know, I would really love to see more of is a pivot away from constantly teaching children. Like, I don't dislike kids learning video games, but the thing with that is they would be better off learning computer logic and game system design, and that does not require a computer. That's all with paper and pen and popsicle sticks and stuff. But like, there are so many other people, older people who already have a background in theater, who are in film, who are a sculptor, who would be better suited to like be taught these skills and kind of jump into that in that way. And also, like, there are lots of Native people working in tech, lots of them. It's just that games are risky. So if there was a way of sort of being like, hey, we'll pay for you for 2 whole years at your regular salary, so you don't have to work for Goldman Sachs, and you can work on this, like that kind of stuff. Like, the capacity is there. I just think there's like way too much focus on, I don't know how to phrase it without it being like super incendiary, but like there's a big target on children, our community's children, to create content for games. And I find a lot of it is not doing anything to help them get into the industry because it does not come with things like trips to events where they can meet with other devs or opportunities to work at studios. It's exclusively extractive for the purpose of getting these stories from them to be able to, for the group that makes it, to turn around and be like, let's win awards, let's show this off. And it's like, it upsets me because what are you doing to build capacity? How is this not just self-extracting from your youth? And then, are you giving them those opportunities? Like, are they able to turn around and be like, I worked on this game, I can put this as a portfolio piece? Or is it just like, their names aren't on it? Because that's another thing I've seen too, where it's like, you know, Indigenous youth make a bunch of games or do a bunch of story content for things, and then their names are never on it. And you're like, how is this okay? And so I see that a lot right now. I think it's really easy for it to happen because there's not like any particular group of people who know about the industry who are like, hey, wait a minute. Because a lot of times the adults are, you know, as we talked about in terms of the same thing with festivals, not knowing. A lot of times the parents or the adults in these situations don't see it for what it is. They're just like, no, they're having fun, right? And you're like, they're being extracted from. That's what's happening. If they're not getting credit, if they're not getting opportunities out of it, that is pure extraction. And I get on a high horse about that, and people don't like it. Thought I heard this rant so many times.
Well,
I've participated in this rant.
Well, I mean,
I want someone to think of the children.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, I think even with advertisement and the way people market towards children, and children are a big market, because even you think they have no money, they don't. Their parents have money. And they buy all these things. And yeah, because like, even I mean, speaking of Fortnite, I mean, I had never played it. I'm like, it's a free game. Sure, I'll play it, I guess. And then all of a sudden, I went on there, and then I was like, they had a xenomorph skin, and I was like, oh, what the heck? And I ended up spending like $30 on the xenomorph skin, and I was like, felt just horrible afterwards, going, what am I doing with my life? And then continue to do it other characters as well too, where I'm just like, I don't know why, but I need it. And I don't even, I do play the game. I just don't play it like every day or is enough to warrant spending as much as I have on skin.
So as much as I hate to say, you know, another skin / character, whatever, have you seen the one they partnered with, Hallucination?
I did. I wanted to know more information about that because I was a little confused as to how the development came about. I did see that the main artist, I don't believe they were Indigenous, but I believe they were a person of color.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think
it was
just,
more of a,
yeah, you know.
yeah, it was more of a, like a partnership and sort of like helping design colors, you know, sort of the look of, but the actual person who built it was not Indigenous.
Yeah.
But you know, it's one of those things where it's like there's a market, and you know, people are willing to, you know, make attempts at it, and it's just like, you know, we just need our own people willing to make the attempts at it.
Yeah. Well, I think I've gotten as far as I'm gonna get in the game because I'm lost. So I was like,
midnight.
I know. I was like, I know
Oh,
we've lost some people. They've told us it's getting late. We're going to bed.
Remember how we said it'd be 3 hours?
We have been actually.
We weren't lying.
Right? I know.
Every time.
But before we go, and I wanted to say thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know we were like, well, like maybe an hour, but I'm like, listen, I streamed for 6 I streamed for 6 hours yesterday. I was playing New World actually. Yeah, so I could go forever, but as we're wrapping it up, what was I gonna say? Do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into game development? Because I know it's something that me and my brother have talked about. I don't even know where to begin.
Sade?
Like I said, my experience is definitely not typical. But a big thing right now is it depends where you want to get in on, like, in the industry, because there's a lot of different parts of the industry that people don't always realize. Like, it's not just art and concept art and like 3D modeling. Like, there are all kinds of jobs. There's like narrative design, there's sound design, there's, you know, physics is working in the actual like programming end of things. So it's like, as a native person, it really depends on what it is you're interested in, because you know, we have people who are technically minded, like maybe they wanted to get into like the coding aspects of it. You know, a lot of big things are like, it's like, oh, let's teach the kids coding. It's like, yeah, that's cool. It's like there's potentials for the jobs in that. So it's just like, honestly, from my perspective, as like a young person aspiring to make game devs, one of the best things you can do is like find some free like programs that will let them attempt to build things. Like, I did an after school program for a while, and we did this project. I can't remember what it was done by MIT, but it was like a little free like builder app where you could, yeah, Scratch. So you could essentially make a little version that you could play games on your phone and stuff like that. And you know, that was one of the things that really got kids like interested in, like, you know, 'cause they could make their own little things. And you know, that's a good intro to get people who are really into it, sort of like more into it. And honestly, YouTube is a great resource anymore. Especially, you know, looking at, you know, different programs, like more, if kids are into 3D modeling, you know, because there are people who are into it. Blender is free, you know, and there are free alternatives to Photoshop. You know, there are free versions of, you know, different painting programs if we want to get into like the art side of things. Um, you know, it's, for a lot of us, it's going to be looking for alternative methods than what would normally be like the routes. Like, oh, you got to go to an art school, or you got to go specifically to a game
Mhm.
design school. Like I have friends who went to DigiPen in Washington, and
Mhm.
like that was like so it's supposedly like one of the premier game design schools. And a lot of the people I know who went there are, a lot of them are burned out now, but also a lot of them are just like, it wasn't that great. To learn more in the industry than you did actually at school. And
Mhm.
that's true with any industry. It's like you kind of learn more once you're actually doing it. And we're at a point now where people are making indie games by themselves, and it can be done. We just got to find the tools for it. Maybe not the best advice, but that's what I got.
I think that's pretty good. I mean, my advice is going to be like, make 10 games as quick as possible, and then make 10 more, and then make 10 more, and just get them done as fast as possible. Like, so this is my first mature published game. I've already made like 20 games.
Mhm.
By the time I got to this point, I've made lots of stuff, and I've made games that never made it to code, that were just purely paper prototypes, like or written out, or turned into a card game or something like that. So like I've made lots of games, and me as a game designer, I'm interested in systems, but I can't know if something will work until I make it. And I think one of the things that I see plaguing a lot of people is they do a giant project right away, and they get overwhelmed, and they get burnt out, and either they finish and they hate it, or they never finish. And it's like,
Mhm.
just make as many as possible, make them tiny, keep them under like keep your scope down. If you have to, cut it and then cut it in half again. It's just more important to get something done. I think Nathan Powell's line is a really good example of
Mhm.
an Indigenous dev who does that. You can actually find his stuff on itch.io, and that's what he does. He comes up with an idea and he just proves it out. And then he's like, okay, and I'm done. And then he does it again, and he does it again. And he does it, and it doesn't matter
Mhm.
how weird or dumb it is. He's just playing with it. So be playful, get it done, and then that's how you decide whether you want to keep doing this. It's just like art. It's just like any art,
Mhm.
or making, or if you want to make it like a more complex thing, it's like making a drum. Your first one is gonna suck. Your first one always sucks. You're probably gonna have to restretch it again. But if you want to become a drum maker, you're going to have a lot of trial and error. Even if you have a mentor, you're still going to fail. So it's more important
Mhm.
to do as much as quick as possible.
Well, okay. So
That's
we're
my
gonna have
advice.
a million games out there made by Indigenous
Yeah.
people. 10 a year. Or 10. I mean, not a year. You didn't
Yes.
say a year. You just said 10.
This is 10.
Yeah,
Because your
just 10.
first 10 are going to suck, and your second 10 are going to not be great, and your third 10 are going to be like, okay.
Well,
I'm
thank
in my first of my third 10s.
your first of your okay. You're like I'm like not exactly beginner, but I'm near there.
Yes. I'm entering emerging, maybe.
Someday I will be emerging.
I know,
Someday I'll be established.
right? It's funny. I like again, like I was there was an announcement that I think it was it Telefilm or is it NFB, and someone won Emerging Filmmaker Award, and it was like um oh, I'm so bad with people's names, but she did Mohawk Girls,
Mm. Hmm.
Oh, yeah.
and this was after that, and she had already done, like, I think this was her second successful TV show that she had done, and then she's like, yeah, she won an award for being an emerging filmmaker, and I'm like, what? Well, if she's emerging,
Yeah.
I'm don't even ask me what I am because I don't know. Tracy's here,
Yeah.
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 Oh,
But I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
I was I was so confused. I was like, what? Really? I mean, at least like intermediate. but it's not what I would consider
Yeah.
because I do know a lot of her projects. Like, obviously I'm in the film industry, but plus I'm in the industry. So I go to film festivals and I'm like always looking at these things. So I'm like, huh? But I guess so.
Yeah,
um,
Yeah.
but
that's
they
yeah,
can,
that was.
yeah. Sorry, go on.
I was like, actually, film industry was one of those things where I was kind of like, man, I would kind of like to do that. So it's like it's that same sort of idea. It's like,
I will tell you, in the industry right now, the thing that I get asked for the most is animators. And
hmm
the biggest thing is because, and like not 3D animators, like 2D animators, because
hmm,
the biggest issue with 3D animators is the to develop a you develop like a rigging system basically for a character, and then you can move it
mhm,
around and manipulate it. That system alone costs so much money, and it's
yep,
really expensive just even for the programs. So it's really expensive. And then some people just want 2D. So I know
mhm,
so many people that are looking for indigenous animators, to the point where the ones that are in the industry and are working are very overworked, and or work for companies. So then they're already doing company projects. Um so the people
I
that I
mean,
know
I
have had to reach out to non-indigenous companies that can hire some people, but it's still a non-indigenous company, and it's,
mhm,
yeah. There's
oh
so
yeah,
many out there.
well, like having gone to Sheridan College, which was like a premier animation school in Canada.
Hmm.
Um, super racist teachers and are making things too hard on their students.
Hmm.
Like the tears we would, like, because I worked in the Indigenous student office, but like the tears we got from
Hmm.
students fighting against their band who's putting all these restrictions on them that on top of their schooling.
Hmm.
And it seems to be more prevalent in the arts than it is. Filmmaking does not seem to have the same things, but yeah, because we did have some who were in the film and the theater and they didn't have the same thing. But it also could be by band. But yeah, it was just like it most of them left. They quit.
Hmm.
They're like, I can't handle the stress. They have no support, and their teachers are really racist and sexist. Like the animation industry is bad. Teachers seem to be worse. So I don't blame a lot of Indigenous students for piecing out on it when every other department seems to not have nearly as bad a problem.
Hmm.
Or at least, like, if you complain about it, it's taken seriously.
Yeah.
mm.
Well, I
I
know.
lucked out and had one instructor who said never worked for Disney, and this is a guy who
Yeah.
actually did work for Disney during their golden age.
Oh.
So yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not that's definitely not shocking. Well, I know one of the things that we were talking about doing is because of that was developing some sort of like, because we used to do a film project called Dreamspeakers on Tour, which we teach youth, indigenous youth filmmaking. And basically we'd show them the basics of like what it means, because a lot of people don't even understand what a producer, executive producer, or director or whatever, like they don't understand what all these roles mean. So we kind of created these groups, and then each one of them had an opportunity to be in these roles so that we could like show them how to do it. And yeah, it was just literally funding. Our funding got cut for this project because the funding that we got for this project, actually a lot of organizations lost them because they ended up funneling it through, I think it was like was it UPIP? I can't remember what it was called, but it was something like that. And they decided to cut it off, and then they decided to give it to the friendship centers to then distribute the money, which was a whole problem in itself. And yeah, and we're like, but we relied on it for our program, and so did a lot of people. And they were like, well, it was never supposed to be long-term funding. It was project funding that was supposed to be year to year. And I'm like, yeah, but you gave it to us every year, so that we need to keep do it.
Yeah.
So it was this whole thing, and but yeah, but we wanted to maybe develop something like that, because yeah, again, it's one of the things that in the industry, that's one of the things that we're looking for is how do we encourage indigenous youth to look into doing 2D animation, and
mhm.
also producers.
Yeah.
We need more
Actually,
producers.
Actually, I do have
Yes.
one suggestion
Mm-hmm.
that is fairly accessible right now, depending.
Yeah.
I say fairly. If you are able to put an iPad in the hands of students, you can get Procreate. Procreate, $10 for the
Mm-hmm.
app, supports 2D animation.
Yeah.
People are doing professional like projects with the animation system in Procreate. So like if you have a few that
Yeah.
you can put in front of students and then like they can play with that system,
Yeah.
already right there we've got some potential for, capacity building.
Wow. It's good to know.
So yeah.
Cool.
I want to talk more about this, but I really have to go to bed
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I actually have a fever. Um,
Oh
I'm sick.
no. Oh no.
I just really wanted to do this.
Oh, thank you. I'm also getting over a cold. My mother actually has COVID. I've tested myself every day
Oh.
since then, and my tests are negative, but I've had like a sore throat and
I
a
am also
cold
negative.
all week. So I think I just have
Oh,
a regular cold. I just haven't been doing it, but like I said, thank you so much for being here. If there's anything that you want to promote or where they can follow you, please let us know. Make it.
buy our game. Buy
Yeah.
our game.
Tell your
Hill
friends and family to
Agency.
buy our game.
Yeah. So if they don't want to be on Steam, they can buy it on itch.io. You do not need an account to buy it.
Nope.
Also, itch.io allows a lovely little feature called a tip, so you can give us a tip.
Yeah.
We've had like 2 parents do that.
Yeah.
Yay.
Just for the heck of it, my brother and I started a little LLC
Yeah.
business. It's called Rising Suns Media with an O, Suns with an O. It's named after the drum group that our dad used to sing powwows with back in like the 80s and
Mm.
90s. Um, and it's just sort of like my brother does audio production, and he actually has a couple songs in the game that we made with Meagan, and she actually hired him for that, just based on like uh, an Instagram
Little
video he put
sample.
out. Yeah, a little sample. She's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, you think you want to work on this?" I'm like, "I don't know, ask him." So
That I still had to ask you.
yeah, and then
Also, blanket door.
yeah, but
Your blanket
blanket
door. Yeah.
blanket door is kind of our little like silly merch brand where people can get our artwork and whatnot. It's all raisingsunsmedia.com has like all of our stuff on it right now. So that's it's my work, it's some of his stuff, and just sort of like some of the things we're doing. And definitely could use any help we can get.
Yes. Yes, if you want merch, go there.
Yay. All right. Well, just hold on one sec. I'm just gonna tell everyone goodbye and thank you for all being here. And we will see you again later. Bye.
Bye.
Or nah.